Hello, we are starting another session. Anyone who is live, can you comment on the audio quality, please?
Keep talking a bit.
Testing the audio quality.
Now it's clear, good. Now noise is not there compared to actually that was connectivity issue.
Testing 1 2 3 audio check on the Bluetooth.
Yeah, good.
Can a few people check if the audio is clear on the Facebook Live here? Is that clear? Good to go. So far, take me easy, man. Ladies and gentlemen, Sabah has joined after long. It's properly clear, right?
Yeah, better than previous.
Better?
No. Actually, I should have got that mic.
Can you check the audio? One or two people? And the screen? Better. Okay, then let's keep it like this. The screen size is okay. Slides are unreadable.
No, I just zoomed in. Just
I know it's good to hold right now. You get it good. Lucky we didn't start it.
yeah.
Ramati, I mean, you're getting some voice.
Traffic and noise.
Look like many people are still like looks like all
Okay guys, we'll get started at 7:10, so maybe shut down your MP screens, otherwise we'll get some noise. So we'll just check with the guys online maybe. If can a few people who dialed in online please confirm that the audio is clear now? We have switched off any noise disturbance from the local audience. You can just make sure that your voice is clear and the slides are visible. Send us a message please so we can get started. People online, please confirm whether audio is clear and the slides are readable. Thank you, then we can get started. Just watch for messages on the screen there.
It's good. It's good.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think we're good to go then. Meanwhile, we also have some good crowd from the local audience.
Now better, people are commenting like initially it was not good, now it's good.
Okay, thanks for your patience. People, took us a little while to get the audio cleared via this Bluetooth headset.
Yeah.
audio is clear.
Audio is clear.
We are good to go now. We want to make sure that the live session as well as the recording which comes out of it, which will be added to the website for future reference, that we get a proper recording obviously. Okay, let's get started. I think it's around 7:10 now, so we'll need at least 2 hours to wrap up some 180 slides in this slide deck. This year I've kept the presentation a little bit less technical. People who want to go a little bit deeper can still refer to the website ultrajourneys.org 2018, where I'll go a little bit more in depth on certain aspects like map reading and all that stuff, but this year I wanted to keep it a little bit more lively and a little less technical so it reaches out and it's more understandable to a wider audience. Okay, so let's start it. So overall, there are some 9 topics, so I'll give a small introduction on myself, not required for the guys in Chennai, but some of you who don't know me yet online will give a small history. Second part, introduction. So I'll give a small overview of the entire journey, 4-month journey this year on covering 120 passes over some 3,000 kilometers in the Himalayas between May to mid-September. And then we'll go a little bit deeper on Himalayan terrain. So we need to understand the terrain clearly to understand what are the kind of gears you will need to do these kind of trips. We'll also talk about the weather. Weather is very important, and then the gears as well as the shelter you require to keep yourself warm at night and in certain weather conditions like rains and stuff. We'll talk about food and cooking, what are the options there. A little bit about the people of Himachal. They have really been a big part of this journey, in just both last year and this year. Hospitality in some of these remote villages, hamlets, gujars, mountain tribes and shepherds has been really heartwarming. So one chapter on that. Then something on the actual journey. So we'll look at a couple of high-level maps of Uttarakhand, Himachal and Ladakh, which areas, which mountain ranges, which passes were covered. And then a couple of diverse topics which I could not categorize under any other topic. Well, so that's the high-level thing. People in the audience, if you have some questions, you can also always interrupt, but we'll try to keep the Facebook Live going smoothly, so maybe most of the questions we'll take at the end. In between any important questions, anything unclear, you can always interrupt. People online, please message any questions you have. All the questions will be answered after the session in a day or two, so any doubts which remain after the presentation, don't hesitate to just drop a message and we'll get back to you. I'll post a Q&A then with a link on my Facebook and Instagram. Okay, Kusha, could you operate maybe the slides? So small, first a disclaimer. I think you're going to see a lot of pretty pictures and beautiful scenes, beautiful nature, beautiful people. But let's always be aware that the Himalayas are also at the same time a very treacherous mountain range. It's the roof of the world. You're going to, I personally went to some 6,200 meters. So you're going to pretty high altitudes where weather especially can be very sometimes life-threatening. The terrain, it's a very young mountain range. It's highly eroded in some places. I've seen a lot of changes. I mean, a lot of signs of climate change actually, which have caused quite a big impact on these higher altitudes, like landslides, extra snow. So that again has sometimes pretty risky, dangerous stream currents, sudden changes in weather. So then also I want to say that I'm not the expert here. I only started hiking in the Himalayas to the higher passes since last year, June, I guess. So I hardly have 1 year of experience in these things, so don't take everything here for granted. I'm sure that there are people out there who have been hiking for decades and who know certain things better than me. So whatever I say here is from my own point of view and limited experience, even though I covered some 160 passes last and this year. And then, so of course, going with a group is always a little safer. Going with a guide and so is always more predictable. Going to known trails, known passes. So in this journey, it will be about alpine style, going by yourself. In many cases I went solo, no guides. Many of the passes were explored, were unknown to me. So that again adds a certain element of unknown, a certain element of risk. So be aware of all these things before you step into the Himalayas yourself. Next slide. So I want to also say a few thanks to a couple of people without whom this journey would have not been possible. First of all, I want to thank Mani, who has been even better than me in terms of planning the passes and the routes. Mani is one of our runners in Chennai Trekking Club, has vast knowledge on routes and passes over the Himalayas, Uttarakhand, Himachal, Ladakh. So he has helped me a lot in putting in 4 or 5 months journey together. Thanks to Josefa, who gave me a wonderful sleeping bag built to keep me warm in some pretty extreme conditions this year. Kartik has sponsored a lot of my gears. And then I got a lot of useful info from a couple of experts on the Himalayas, like I can say Satya, and a solo alpine style hiker from Bangalore. Pranav is a well-known guy, Tarun, Jean-Claude Latombe. These guys maintain wonderful blogs on the internet. Thanks to these people who have actually captured and blogged their experiences, we were able to find a lot of useful information that allowed us to go to some of these passes, which would have otherwise not have been possible. The Indian Himalayas do not have much information online. There's no centralized repository, so you largely depend on individual blogs sometimes to identify some of the hiking routes. Then some of the brands I've been using myself, I don't want to, advertise these things, but like the OnePlus phone has captured all the photos that you'll see. Salewa, I was very happy with their trail running shoes, Montane backpack and rain jacket, Outdoor Research, BB, Black Diamond for some technical gears like Isaacs and Poles. So these brands have been really been very helpful and proven over these 4 months. Next slide.
Next slide.
Okay, so small introduction on myself for the people who don't know me. Just 2 slides. Next. So this is myself like some 30, 40 years back in Belgium in my parents' garden. So I've always been a little bit outdoors. I was lucky to grow up in a small village in the outskirts, actually, green outskirts of a small village. Used to play outside, used to swim in the waters, play with my cycle, used to run, do some runs in the neighborhood with my neighbors. And then also I was very happy, lucky that my parents at a young age took me hiking to many places in Europe, like south of Belgium, you have the Ardennes, the mountain range, and then also once in a year to Switzerland. I think that exposure at a young age made a lot of difference for a future passion for nature and the mountains. Next. So then when I came to India some 20 years ago in '98, so initially I started first couple of years, top left corner, started with biking, got myself an Enfield Bullet, and I was already exploring the Himalayas on bike 2000, 2001, 2008, 2011. So that, of course, you stay on the road. It's not as flexible as being on foot. So then 10 years later, top right corner, we started the Chennai Trekking Club, and we started doing a lot of wilderness hiking, again alpine style exploration, hikes through South Indian jungles, Karnataka, Andhra, Tamil Nadu, Kerala. So that gave a lot of experience on map reading, contours, topographic maps, finding your way in dense jungles, which is sometimes more challenging than in an open landscape with alpine meadows in north. Then later on, I went into mountain biking, did quite a little bit of long distance touring in Vietnam, Sri Lanka, and also did some cycling in the Himalayas, like Shimla to Leh, 1,000 kilometers. So again, on the cycle, you get a lot of flexibility to get into some of the trails. And then finally, top left, actually, I started running in the last 5 years, which again allowed me to enter deep into the mountains. Bottom left, you see a picture from Vietnam. So last year I ran some 2,000 kilometers over 50 days in the mountains north of Vietnam, close to the border with China, which was actually the start of all this. That was my first long trip, 50 days, fully self-supported. That was actually simple using Google Maps. I didn't have to plan much because most of the trails in Vietnam are present in Google Maps. It's also a little less extreme. Mountains are only going to 2,000 meters. So less risky and less extreme than the Himalayas. So this is a little bit my background in terms of outdoors and adventure and kind of endurance. In terms of hiking, actually real hiking to the higher passes, that's only started last year when I covered some 40 high altitude passes in the Himalayas. So that was actually my version. Entry into the high mountains, and this year actually was only the second kind of big trip to the Himalayas. But again, I came loaded with quite a little bit of exposure and hiking exposure in the mountains of South. Yeah, next one. So when the whole trip actually got started, I keep using this picture in some of the presentations with a board I saw somewhere near Dundee. This board, it's like a rusted board put up by the HP Tourism Department near Dundee on the Manali-Leh highway. So as soon as you go over the Rotang Pass, you will find it somewhere near the first checkpost in Koksar. So this actually we discovered, we saw while we were running from Shimla to Jammu some 3 years ago. Saba was also there. So we ran 700 kilometers from Shimla towards Jammu through the Spiti and Pangi valleys. And so then actually we saw that when we run, basically we run along the roads through the villages. But this board showed us, say, like you can see valleys here. But in between those valleys on this board, you see a lot of kind of hiking routes that connect actually passes, connecting different valleys between passes. So looking at that board, I kind of got inspired the next year then in 2018 to explore some of these passes. Yeah. Okay, so small introduction. So this will be like a summary chapter on this year's journey. So here you can see overall a high-level map. So here you can see part of the Indian Himalayas. So we're actually excluding the northeast. So initially we started in the month of May in Uttarakhand with lower altitude passes. In May there's still a lot of snow. So we did a lot of sub 4,000 meter passes in Uttarakhand, actually crossing it completely from the Nepal border east all the way to the western side of Uttarakhand, and then entering Himachal. From Himachal again we proceeded to the Great Himalayan National Park, which is right of Kulu, somewhere below the Parvati and Peel National Park here. Great Himalayan National Park, very undocumented but very beautiful. From there we proceeded then later in June to the Dolador here. Dolador is this range. It's a little bit above Dharmasala, so beautiful place. Both the lower Dolador as well as the passes, which actually connect to this valley, which is the Chamba Valley. Then by the end of June and beginning of July, when the monsoon sets in, the northwest monsoon, which comes towards, say, the lower Himalayas, then this whole place actually gets flooded, say, with a lot of rain. So then we escaped over the Pir Panjal, this whole snow range, towards the high altitude desert of Zanskar and Ladakh. So there normally you're pretty safe from the monsoon, as the clouds do not cover and do not get across this 4,000 and 5,000 meter ranges of Dolador and Pir Panjal. So here I spent actually most of July till mid-August, when again there was some heavy flooding, some all across Himalayas, and then again we came down to do a couple more passes here around Mani Mahesh and Kangra. So that was a high-level journey. So a couple of numbers here. So overall we covered some 3,000 kilometers over 3 states, 12 districts. 3,000 kilometers is a lot, but more than that I would say it's this number, this 175,000 meter of elevation gain. That is actually the one which is very draining, takes a lot of effort. You burn lots of calories climbing every day, almost 2,000 meters over from one valley over a pass to the next valley. And so you can see 175,000 is a lot. Mount Everest is just 8,000. So you can multiply how many Mount Everests go in that. I'm not saying it that we go to that extreme altitude of 8,000 meters, but you have a huge amount of climb done over these 4 months. So overall we covered 120 passes in some 4 months, which came roughly down to one pass almost every day, which is quite a lot. That will again be due to my background in running, due to the fact that we go very lightweight. I hardly carry some 5 kilograms with me compared to the average Himalayan hiker who will have easily 20-25 kilograms on the back. You can pick a chair, guys, from there, make yourself comfortable. So and then also very beautiful, we covered some 340 hamlets, a lot of villages, very remote villages, in almost as many valleys, 120 valleys, where you meet, these are like very remote, many of them are not even connected by roads. And the people you meet there, the hospitality you find there is really beyond words. So this is not the usual tourist places like Shimla, Manali, Leh, but really very less touristic places. So people, no tourists really go there. And when you then come there, mostly again as a solo hiker or just with 1 or 2 people, you get really overwhelmed with amazing hospitality, people giving tea, food, asking you to stay over. So out of 120 nights, actually, I would say only 50 to 60% we actually camped outside. Easily 40 to 50% we stayed with people, whether it's in villages, whether it's with mountain tribes, which we call Gujars, or whether it's with shepherds. So amazing hospitality. which you typically find in any remote place that is not being affected by materialism and modern society. Voila, here you can see a high-level view on the gears. We'll go in much detail on this, but you can see it's a pretty compact set. So you got some basic clothing here, you have some warm layers on top of that, a couple of electronics, very few technical gears, so I'm not at all any mountaineer, I'm not familiar, gone through any training related to mountaineering. So I've always kept my feet most of the time on firm ground, on trails, not really into climbing. But a couple of technical gears will be there to go through certain features of the terrain. You don't see any tent here, you'll see some very basic shelter, which has successfully kept me warm in those 120 nights. We'll go in more detail later on. So here you can see those 120 passes, so 120 selfies, so many of them solo. In between 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks, some guys joined from our running gang. So it was nice to go with some company. Sometimes it was very nice to be solo. Being all alone by yourself in those very vast empty places is really like an overwhelming experience. We'll come to that in a moment. So one slide on ranges and passes. We'll talk a lot about that in the presentation. So let's all be clear on that. So what is a range actually? A range is basically, you can say, a line or a set of ridges or a set of peaks that you can connect. So basically here you see a high range. In this case, the Pir Panjal. Pir Panjal is like a range of mountains, all easily above peaks above 5,000 meters, that separate the Chamba Valley below here in the lower Himachal with the upper valley, which is the Pangi Valley, which it is actually Pangi on the left and Lahore on the right. This is the Chenab River, the Chandrabhaga River, which comes from the Lahore side. So both these valleys are actually separated by high ranges. So these are all peaks you can connect, right? It's pretty high, and then actually to cross from one valley, say the Chamba Valley to this Pangi Valley, you will identify certain low points, saddles, so basically U-shaped things, where you can cross over from using side valleys. Then you leave the main valley, Chamba Valley, you go through the side valley, cross a pass, here in this case Kuki Pass, again you get into a side valley, till again you hit the main valley. So that will be the daily routine actually, to cross those saddles, known saddles. These are mostly ancient routes used by people who used to migrate, like shepherds who go on an annual migration with their big herds of sheep and goats to graze the high altitude meadows. Or some of the passes are also used by villagers to kind of, some of the villages are semi-nomadic. They stay in the higher ranges during the summer, and they come back to the plains in the winter when the place is fully covered with snow. So here in this case you see a couple of passes, Tobia Pass, which I did last year, Kuki Pass also was done last year. So these are basically, if you go to the next slide, so these are basically those low points. Here you can see the Kuki Pass, shepherds on its way to basically, you always approach it mostly from the side, because going it head on is very steep. So most of the time you will cross the pass from the side, you will come through to it. And you can see right on the right side here, Google Earth, it's like the lowest point between two peaks. So you'll have to do the least amount of climbing. But again, the passes themselves also can be quite high by itself. They will be below the peaks, but they can also easily go to 4,000 or 5,000 meters of altitude. But it's still, I mean, less of an effort and a little bit easier than scaling the peaks, which will be above the passes. Voila, and here you can see like an elevation profile. Again, as I mentioned, it's not about the distance. So here we look at the Kalihini Pass, which connects Kulu Valley with Kangra, with Chamba Valley, actually Kangra, Barabangal. So it's like 0 to, what is it? It's around 50 kilometers long. But more than that 50 kilometer distance, it's about, as I mentioned, the climbs, right? So if we start from, I think, this on the left side, we are in Kangra, the Chamba Valley, Barabangal on the right side, we are in the Kulu Valley, near to Manali somewhere, small village near Manali. So and you can see initially you're climbing up a little bit steeply, then again you're going up, you're going down, up. Then it's a gradual climb towards the pass. This is the Kalihini Pass, the highest point, 4,800 meters, and then you're dropping down very steeply into the Kulu Valley. then you're contouring in the valley, and then again it's a very steep drop. So it's mostly that climbing and descending actually which will be the main challenge when you're gonna travel across these passes. It's not either 50 kilometers. Whenever you approach a pass, you're not gonna say it's 50 kilometers, 60 kilometers. It's gonna say you're gonna take so many days, or you're gonna climb so many meters. That is gonna define your timeline, and that will also define your campsites, right? So you don't want to be stuck in the evening near the pass, because in the evenings the weather can change, can become very cold and very inhospitable on top of these higher altitudes there. So both your campsite before the pass and after the pass, you will try to come down as low as possible so you can camp, say, below 3,000 meters, which will make it much more pleasant. Climate will be less extreme, the nights will be warmer, you can carry a much lesser shelter with you. So that's again one of the reasons going minimalist with less luggage will allow you actually to go faster, and will always allow you to actually cross the pass faster and actually stay at lower altitude. So somebody traveling minimalist will go faster and will need to carry less shelter because you can stay at lower altitudes most of the time. Next. So on the website, so I've been documenting since last year and especially this year a lot, so that other people who are interested can easily repeat some of these things. On this blog you'll find a lot of useful information, like a complete reference list on the 120 passes here, with the starting village, the end village, the altitude of the pass, the starting altitude, ending altitude, how much meters of climb, how many meters of descents, the district where the pass is located, the difficulty level, so you can, if you're a beginner, you can start with something easy, don't immediately jump to something difficult. And then there's one more column which is not shown there, which will be dangers, which are the challenges or dangers faced in that specific pass, so that at least you have a feeling, right? In some of the passes there will be more risk involved, more dangers, which again can be, of course, very specific to the seasons. Crossing a pass early summer when there is still a lot of snow can be easier, can be more difficult than, say, doing it midsummer. So there is a lot of change in the terrain, change in difficulty level, because the life cycle of the seasons, the streams, the amount of meltwater in the streams, that all makes a big difference. So I've also mapped all these 340 villages on the map, so everything is available on the website. So for every village I've taken a picture, so you actually get a beautiful photo collage as well as the exact location of all these villages. All this information, the passes and the villages, have been added to the maps which I've been using, which is called OpenStreetMaps. OpenStreetMaps is like a public source, open source version of Google Maps, where Google Maps mostly deals with cities and roads, doesn't go beyond that. OpenStreetMaps has a lot of valuable information. There's a lot of hiking trails there, campsites, bridges, where can you cross the stream. A lot of useful information, a lot of like remote villages which you will not find on Google Map, but you'll still find them on OpenStreetMaps. So I've also added a lot of passes, especially Uttarakhand here, and then the Pir Panjal range, which is mostly used by shepherds, lesser known passes, has been added to these OpenStreetMaps. So any one of you going to osm.org will get those maps, and you can search any of these villages, any of these passes, so you have an idea where they are located, and you can also plan your journey to those places. So here, those 340 small villages crossed, of course, too small to see it, but again on the website you'll find a nice picture of every village. Some of these villages are extremely remote, hardly anybody comes there because there is no roads, no electricity, but the more remote typically means the more warm the people will be. The hospitality in the most remote places is really beyond words. People treat you as almost like a royal guest, treat you as one of their family members. This really genuine hospitality which you can experience in some of these villages, compared to going to the usual touristic places where people have completely changed in their mindsets. Okay, this slide is in progress. I am still also documenting all the valleys and the rivers that were crossed. Next one. So during those 120 days, I've met a lot of hikers, especially in the more known passes, touristic places. I've not seen a single soul in most of the lesser known valleys and passes. So there are 4 types of people that I saw. All of us know the commercial groups like say India Hikes or Trek the Himalayas, where basically these are commercial groups where you will go as a group and people have a guide. Campsite will be ready. You will just carry your own luggage, but all the tents and all that stuff will be put up for you. People will cook for you. So that's actually the easiest way to get started and get the first feel of the Himalayas. But personally, I feel that doesn't give you that same feeling or that same experience or same satisfaction as going on your own actually. In Ladakh, I saw a lot of Europeans. I think I've seen like all European nationalities going around Leh Ladakh, especially near Marka Valley and those places. So there, those again go like in expedition style, which basically means you will have European couple, 2 people, will come with 5 horses, loaded with 250 kilograms of luggage, including tables, chairs, toilets, tents, and all that stuff. They will be eating pizza and pasta in the middle of nowhere. And they will have a guide, they will have a cook, they will have a horseman actually. So those are called expeditions where you don't carry actually your luggage. Again, you have a guide, and it's more like an enjoyment trip. It's a very nice experience because also many of these people are like these are people who reach pension age, like 50, 60 years, and who are still covering some very challenging passes over 2-3 weeks. But of course, it's spending quite a bit of money and actually not really going on their own strength. So then I would say out of 10 people you meet, there are 2 people who are like alpine style also. They go by themselves, no guides. They will have like a big paper map. Typically you have these big maps of Ladakh which have routes and passes. Sometimes they will use the GPS, sometimes they will simply use the compass. But none of the guys I saw during those 4 months actually goes minimalist. All the guys I saw are actually struggling with those 60-liter bags. Everyone has 18, 20, 25 kilograms of luggage, and you can see at the pace they are going, it's pretty slow. Because they are going slow, they will have more. It will take more days to cross a certain section. Because again they go slower, they will have to camp higher altitudes, so they will again have to increase the weight. They will have to carry more food. They will have to carry more shelter to be warm at those higher altitudes. So going slower means automatically adding weight. Adding weight again makes you more slow. And on an average, I could see that I was going with my little backpack here easily 3 times faster than the average, alpine style, typically European guys. So I mean, weight matters. I would say. So these are like the 4 configurations I met on the way. Next. Maps, so I can talk a whole evening about maps, so I'll just give you a small overview of which maps were used. If you are interested to learn more about maps, this was extensively covered in last year's presentation. If you have any questions, you can ask me offline, because I think this is pretty technical. Most of you guys might not be interested. Again, out of 120 passes, a lot of useful info was coming from OSM, OpenStreetMaps. More touristic places like say Dolador near Dharmasala, where you have a lot of hikers. Anything near Leh Ladakh, you will find most of the passes in OpenStreetMaps. A lot of valuable information like suitable campsites, where do you find in the mountains like flat spaces with drinkable water, where do you have bridges where you can cross dangerous streams. So a lot of villages not available in Google Map, which you will find in OSM. Where does the forest end? Where do you get into the alpine meadows? So a lot of useful information, which now I've extended with all the passes that I crossed. Contours are very important. So contours or topographic maps basically give you a good understanding of the relief of the mountain, the elevation profile, so that you know that you don't just see that 50-kilometer trail, but that you know what is the steepness at any section of your trail. So contours were actually used on top of this OSM to get a clear view on where are the valleys, where are the ridges, where are the ranges. A couple of trails we identified, myself and Mani, on Google Earth. So if you zoom in on a Google satellite map, you can easily distinguish like something which is hardly half a meter or 1 meter wide, as long as there is a good contrast. If the trail has a different color than its surroundings, like if you have a brown trail in a green meadow, you can easily pick up anything less than a meter. on a Google satellite map. So sometimes we have used that to identify the access trails to some of these lesser known passes which were not documented anywhere, especially shepherd routes. Shepherds do this annual migration across a lot of these passes, but obviously they are not blogging, they don't maintain blog, they are not on the internet, and nobody else actually, no hikers cross those passes. So that information of the shepherds is typically passed on through the generations and only exists in the minds. So, but using Google satellite maps, again, you can spot some sections of this. Then Olysee, which is pictured here, is a very good map, a little bit expensive, but I think we have a soft copy also available somewhere. So 1 by 50,000, so pretty good scale for hiking. Again, mostly only available for the Ladakh sites where many people go hiking, not really covering like the lower Himalayas or Uttarakhand. And of course, GPS logs, as I mentioned, there were a couple of names on the second slide, people who maintain blogs, people who have been hiking for decades in the Himalayas, who have beautiful blogs. So you can extract a lot of useful GPS logs from some of these guys. If they have gone to a certain lesser known pass and they have recorded the trail, you can just download it and put it on top of your master map. And then probably one of the best references, but not easy available, is the Survey of India maps. So these are like very high scale maps, 1 by 20,000, 1 by 15,000, 1 by 25,000 I think, so very high scale, very detailed, but you have to go to the survey office. Online they are available, you can download them, but I think due to security reasons, government is a little bit restrictive on access. So any area near the border actually will not be available online. You can go to the survey office in Chandigarh, buy some of these maps, but again they will have to remove the contour lines. But they contain lots of terrain details. Only thing is, of course, that you need to get a lot of these maps because they only cover like a limited area in such a high scale. 1 by 20,000, I think they just cover some 9 by 9 kilometers. So if you do like a 4-month journey, you'll probably need 200-300 of these maps to cover your entire route. And these are big paper maps, like A2 size, so it's just a piece of paper. You cannot put them electronically in your phone easily unless you scan them in and georeference them to identify your exact position on the map. Okay, and then for navigation, a tool that I've been using very satisfactory in the last 2 years has been this application available on iPhone and Android called OSM Ant. It stands for OpenStreetMaps, AMD. Not sure what this is for, but it's a very nice thing. It's very fast. We have a lot of trail data. 3,000 kilometers of GPS log, route markings, and all that stuff tends to be a little heavy with some mobile apps, but this guy does it very zippy, zooming in, zooming out. It supports offline maps, so you can download maps of Uttarakhand, Himachal, Ladakh, so you don't need access to internet. You have the maps downloaded. You can overlay it with contour lines here, which you see on the left side, right? These contours or relief lines, basically, which gives you like clear idea of the steepness of the terrain. You can import your own GPS logs. So on top of the base OSM map, which already has quite a few passes, you can add your own trails, which are not part of OSM. And then basically you have a fully functional offline navigation tool with maps and showing your current location directly on the map. So that was very useful to navigate last year as well as this year. Okay, a couple of slides on the journey again, as I already mentioned. So many of the passes that were done was completely new, totally different from the 40 done last year. So exploring a pass is something totally different than going to along a known trail, a well-marked route, or going with a guide. So exploring is always quite challenging. People from Chennai Trekking Club who have gone through jungles with us, even in Nagalapuram or like Karnataka or so, you know what it is, right? The first time you explore a trail in the wilderness, it's much more challenging than when you go the second time and the third time and you know the trail, you know the challenges, you know it. It becomes much easier the second time once you know the place. So exploration is actually a little bit more challenging. So again, most of the 120 passes were explored this year. There were lesser known passes, not very touristic except for the Ladakh region, So you don't know, you're not sure about the routes at any time, so you need to be very good with map reading, navigation. You don't know what's ahead of you. You might get stuck on landslide. The trail might not exist anymore. You don't have know the terrain, what is waiting for you. So exploration is a little bit more challenging, a little bit more risky also. Next one. So then alpine style, as I said, instead of just simply following a guide, in a group it's very simple. You just follow the guide in front of you, and there's actually no challenge because you don't need to navigate. You just follow the guide in front of you, which makes the path. So if you go through snow, you will even cut a nice path through the snow. So going by yourself and opening the pass the first time before anybody else goes there, sometimes at the beginning of the summer is a totally different story. There's nobody to carry your luggage, nobody to show you the way, no external support. So it requires a lot of more planning, pre-planning about the route, pre-planning about the terrain, pre-planning about the trail actually, where are bridges, where can you cross the stream. Problem with the Himalayas is also that the terrain is fast changing. So I've done a couple of passes, repeats from last year, but if you do it in a different part of this, in different season, this year there was a lot of snow fall during the winter. You sometimes, even this year, I've seen routes which have become very difficult because a lot of the trail is actually landslided. Mid-16 August there were some heavy rains and they have taken away big portions of the trail. So every time you go, even to the same place, it's sometimes a totally different story. Yeah. So and again, ultra minimalist. So this is, I would say, rule number one of hiking. So less baggage you carry, the faster you are. You can cover a pass or a certain section in less than days, which means you have to carry less food. You can quicker cross these high altitude passes. You can stay at lower campsites before and after the pass. So you need to carry, this means that you need to carry less shelter, which again reduces the weight, which means you're faster. So it's like a vicious circle. The more you carry, the slower you're going to be, and it will again add more food, more shelter to your place. The lighter you are, the faster you can be, and the more shelter and food you can drop, of course. Of course, it's a balance. I don't want to go extreme here, right? If you go really very minimalist with very little food, very little shelter, you always expose yourself to more danger in case you get stuck somewhere for 2-3 extra unplanned days in bad weather, or you're stuck in a landslide, running out of food, or being stuck at a very high position where you need some extra protection. So there is an amount, so it's a balance, a compromise actually between not carrying too less, but also not overloading yourself unnecessarily. I can assure you, I mean, going minimalist really makes it much more enjoyable. If you see many of these hikers struggling with that 20 kilograms on their back, it's again not about the distance, right guys? It's about climbing up, and this is not, some of these passes are not having proper routes, so you're simply scrambling across loose rocks, slippery scree and all that stuff. So again, putting 20 kilograms on your back really drains you like anything. So being able to go fast really, I mean, light really makes the trip so much more enjoyable. Okay, and then again, most of the, I mean not most, but at least 50% of the time I was solo. Solo is something that I got to start to like a lot, starting with Vietnam, and I ran solo there for 50 days in 2018. So going solo is again a little bit more risky. If something happens to you, there will be nobody to help you because you're in the middle of nowhere there. It's so huge that finding an injured person or finding a body there is almost impossible. So, but it's a lot of freedom, your total freedom. You have your own pace. You can go at your own schedule. It's very peaceful. I mean, to be all alone, to sleep all alone under the galaxy, the stardust of the Milky Way there, and some of the darker nights when there is no moon. And it's really an amazing experience. Very gives you a lot of internal peacefulness. It's like a meditative experience, I would say.
Yeah, like the treks of the future.
Yeah. So yeah, I've come to like this because as soon as you, I mean, join. So this is not like a weekend thing, right? If somebody joins, it's like 1 or 2 weeks, and you're spending like 24 hours with those same people. So unless you have somebody which really matches you in terms of physical fitness, in terms of like the same mental wavelength, sometimes it becomes a little bit difficult because everyone has their own ups and downs. This guy wants to camp early, that guy wants different type of food, that guy has to exit in 5 days. So there's a lot of compromises once you start sometimes going along with somebody else. But of course, it also has risks involved, no doubt. Yeah. And then skills. So, I mean, this year again and last year, I've seen a lot of people joining me also. So, what is required to go to the Himalayas? It's not a simple question. I've seen some of the people here are like extremely good, like ultra runners, very good fitness, stamina, and they used to run on trails in South India, rocky trails, Javadu, Kulu. But I see some of those good guys failing in the Himalayas because there is actually it's a totally different story. It's not only about fitness. It's not only about this, southern endurance. It's also about like bad weather. It's very cold. The terrain there is like it's very, very challenging. I mean, I've seen people struggling on rocky terrain. A lot comes here, I think. It's a lot to do with mindset and determination. You need to have a very strong willpower and very determined mind. I've seen a lot of our guys who are like physically paka, but who are simply failing completely there within a couple of days because they don't have the mental determination actually to push through when the going gets tough, when you get into like very cold rain or wind higher up in the passes, when you're in some really tricky situations like landslides and stuff. So going to the Himalayas, and again, alpine style and on your salve, you need to be very aware of where you are. I mean, navigation is very important because getting lost there, getting off the trail there is extremely risky. You can easily get stuck, even if you have like contours and proper maps with you. Some of these places are like extreme, like vertical drop, steep cliffs. So if you lose the trail, I've had a couple of passes like that, then you're sometimes ending up like a little bit of almost mountaineering down some steep slopes to basically get back into like firm ground. So a little bit risky to get lost basically and get off the trail. And again, many of the lesser known passes, they are not used frequently. So it's easy to lose the trail of these things, especially shepherd trails. There is actually no trail most of the time, as you will see in some of the slides in the terrain section. Okay, and then again, I mean, planning a journey is not that simple, right? It's not like, okay, we have 120 passes, we have 3,000 kilometers, connect them in the easiest way, minimize the travel in between, right? You don't want to travel too much in buses or shared taxis. So planning a journey, you need to keep into account several parameters. And so first of all is the altitude. When you start like in April, June, you cannot easily go above 4,000 meters because there will be too much snow still on some of the passes. Snow is okay, as long as the snow is flat, it's fine, but some of these frozen snow gullies can be very tricky to descend. Seasons, of course, once the monsoon kicks in July and August, beginning of August in the lower Himalayas, you don't want to be there because hiking in heavy rains with ferocious stream currents can be very dangerous. Same then in the higher side, like in Ladakh, July, beginning of August, we have a lot of snow melt, fresh snow from the previous winter, and also glacial melt, which causes very dangerous currents in some of these canyons and gorges of Ladakh. So some of these have to be postponed to the end of August, to the beginning of September. Otherwise, they're going to be washed away, and it's one of the most dangerous things, these stream currents. And then, of course, when you talk about shepherds passes only used by shepherds, you can see here, right? This pass has been opened, Kalicho, one of the more treacherous passes over the Pitpanjal. So if you have to open this pass using just this slippery slope here that you slip down, it's like 500 meters down into the valley. So that's the end of it. So sometimes you really want to follow the shepherds who open the pass initially, which is a significant effort. And once, shepherds start going through that with like 1,000+ sheep, then you can find a way and you can go through some of these more, slippery sections. So taking these four to an account, basically high level. So this I meant basically that in May I stayed in Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand, we have some 30 passes there, beautiful passes, a lot of hamlets, a lot of villages where you can stay, you find food. So you don't actually have to carry shelter or food with you because every day you end up in like 3-4 different remote villages. So in May we stayed below 4,000 meters in Uttarakhand. Then basically we went to Himachal. Doladorf and Great Himalayan National Park to go above the 4,000 meter altitude passes in the month of June. Beginning of July, the rains kick in, so then actually we escape towards the Ladakh Zanskar section, but there again you have to plan not to do some of these interior narrow gorges or places without bridges, because it's simply impossible. The routes will be completely too dangerous and impossible. And then again, shepherd passes. Shepherds typically start migrating over, like say Pirpanjal, 4,500, 5,000 meters towards the beginning of July. So only then actually you can plan some of these passes, because opening these passes yourself would take significant effort of cutting the path with your snow ice axe and stuff. Right, so based on these 4 parameters, I put together that 4-month journey. So it requires a lot of reshuffling of those 120 passes in a certain order and certain timeline, so that at that time, at that month, at that week, the pass made sense. Say that you don't get stuck in a monsoon, that you don't get stuck in the snow, that you don't get stuck at this too high altitudes. Yeah. Any questions so far? Okay.
Did you face any problem of floods, landslide, or avalanche?
Yeah, so this year, Chandra, Shekhar, 16 August, I think you heard the news, Chamba was flooded, Himachal was flooded, the Manali-Leh highway was closed there was a massive landslide for 4 days actually. We also got stuck for some time. So 16 August, there was a lot of rain across the Himalayas. I mean, more than usual rain, which caused whatever passes I had left in like the Himis National Park in Ladakh. I was planning some very interior canyons there and routes, non-touristic. Like if you go back again, like some of these canyons here. But because of those rains, you could see the streams were all like full of that brown water. So there was a lot of meltwater, a lot of water taking along the soil, and it became impossible. So I had to reroute some of my planned passes at the end of August to do it probably next year, because some of these things did not become accessible this year. Initially there was too much glacial meltwater, and then mid-August, when the streams were supposed to calm down because of the rains, it got messed up again. And this year I saw something which I haven't seen for 20 years, because I've been going on the bike, on the cycle and running. In Ladakh I've seen almost daily rains, which is very unusual. It used to be a very dry place, but I have a feeling that there is something happening there in terms of global climate change, that somehow rains are getting across these high ranges of Pirpanjal, that's like 5,000 meters. Imagine clouds getting beyond that. And almost every day I had at least some drizzle or rain in Ladakh, which I never saw before. And like since 2000 I've been going there. And even some of the valleys in Ladakh have become like green actually. It's like grasses, flowers, the whole ecosystem, bees, birds have come. So sometimes you're not in that high altitude desert anymore from the previous decades.
Peter, how many days you travel without food?
Yeah, so food planning will come to that. So indeed, again, you're exploring, right? 120 passes, most of them you don't have a clue how long it's going to take. So you think, okay, you look at the elevation profile, you have to climb 2,000 meters, it's around 50 kilometers, so you think 2 days. But then you come across, say, some very tricky terrain, you lose the trail 2-3 times, and you end up 3 or 4 days, which means if you only plan 2 days food, you have a problem, obviously. In many cases, I mean, it's the opposite. We have food with us, and additionally we come in contact with a lot of hospitality, like shepherds, like Gujars, which offer us food. So I even came back to Chennai from the last 2 weeks with all my food, because I've been staying with so many shepherds who always fed us, so we never had to cook our own food. But there have been a couple of instances, where you underplan your foods. It's again that balance, right? You can carry 1 week extra food, but that's going to add weight, so you don't want to do that. Maybe you can carry 1 or 2 extra days. But I'm sometimes a little bit extreme, that I carry really just enough to minimize my weight, and then you end up hungry, and being hungry, having to climb another day of so many meters, it's not an easy thing, of course. But we'll come to a section, there will be a section where you also find like certain edible plants which you can eat, even in Ladakh, which can be a backup in case you run out of food. or water. We'll take some more questions maybe at the end of this session. So this section is important terrain. I mean, these are like high-level pictures, but I just want to go through this because this gives you a feel about the kind of landscapes, about the kind of terrains you'll encounter on different altitudes across these Himalayas, and that make it challenging. So Uttarakhand, again, lot of these beautiful ancient paths connecting across, say, valleys, one valley over a pass to another valley. A lot of ancient paths, you can see they have been beautifully put there. It has taken a lot of effort. Many of these are undocumented, but now, I mean, I've added them to OSM, so at least you know the location of the villages and the paths. Next one, some paths are really like beautifully carved out of the vertical rocks, otherwise it would simply be impossible to hike into this valley. This is like an exit point into Chamba Valley, Kuvrasi village, when you climb the Indrahar Pass from above Dharmasala. So this is your way into Chamba Valley. Like some of these trails are like amazing how they put it there. This is a trail some 30 kilometers from Barabangal, was one of the most remote villages at the end of the Chamba Valley that connects that last village with actually the roads. So 30 kilometers of like trail and steep rock cliffs that are beyond your imagination. I mean, these paths are totally impossible when it rains, too slippery, too risky. It's taken a huge effort actually to build up these paths, right? These are like vertical cliffs, but they build up nicely. And actually every year you see people working and repairing those paths because the Himalayas are alive. Landslides are always happening. Parts of the trail get destroyed. So without regular use, without regular repair, actually trails will keep disappearing. So these are paths. Then you also have the regular trails, right? So this is like a typical forest trail. So like not very clear, but okay, you try to follow it. You see that there's a trail there. It's all rocky, soily. Next. So then, as I told, there's one very big difference in the Himalayas is you're either walking on a trail or sometimes there's no trail. No trail you'll typically have with the shepherds. Shepherds, they don't have time or they don't bother to make nice paths and trails, so you will simply be climbing up these like rocks. And you will see that somebody has passed here because there will be fresh soil, there will be some fresh goats shit. They went through this thing from here to the pass summit. This is Kalicho again, one of these more treacherous passes. If they went through this with like 500 or 1,000 sheep within the last couple of days, you'll see some fresh marks and you can kind of try to find your way to sometimes a labyrinth of small narrow passages that hairpin up through these 1,000-meter vertical drops that you'll see later on. So off-trail is really, I mean, very challenging and very tricky compared to the touristic passes where you walk on like a proper trail like this. Okay, that about trails. So then sections. So this is like a typical forest section, right near the stream. Forests you will typically find below 3,000 meters. When you start from the village, initially you'll have a good forest section, pleasant, more nature, more animals. Then as soon as you go up next, above 3,000 meters, 3 to 4,000 meters, you will come in what we call these alpines, these meadows, beautiful meadows, like so many different flowers there. I've seen them beginning of summer, midsummer, end of the summer, like countless flowers, much more than I used to see in Switzerland, in Europe, in the European Alps. I think tens and tens of different types of flowers I've photographed, many of them I've posted. So then once you go above that vegetation line, somewhere above different altitudes, but above 4,000 meters, you come into rocky terrain. So some of these loose rocks, below these very steep ranges and passes is what we call scree. You can either have like loose soil scree or in this case like rocks. So you step on that and actually it comes down all the time. So it's very effort intensive to walk and climb up on this. Next, so here another scree section. So loose rocks, loose soil, you just step in that and you just sink in the soil. Which is wet and a little fluffy because it's recently the snow has melted. This has been buried under snow during the winter. and then after it melts, you get like these, like a very kind of landslide-prone terrain, you can say. So climbing up through this is quite challenging. Typical moraines are actually like vast fields of rocks. If you go to the next slide, this is zoomed in on the same glacier. This is the Kangla. Kangla is one of the biggest glaciers in Himachal Pradesh, connecting Lahore with Zanskar. It's 25 kilometers of glacier. So on top of that glacier, this is actually on top of the ice. So none of these rocks is actually stable because they are on top of melting ice. So even if it's a big rock, when you in Nagalapuram in south, when we jump rock boulder to boulder, it's pretty stable and under control. But there you have to be very careful because everything is moving as it's sitting on top of a melting glacier. So walking across that obviously is very challenging because it's not totally uneven. Finding a trail to this is impossible. So sometimes they will put these cairns, piles of stones on top at regular intervals to find your way. But there won't be trails here because this thing keeps moving every year as the ice keeps melting. So these sections are quite intense also. And then once you come at the higher altitudes above the rocks, say, or in early summer, you get on to glaciers. This is the Kaligini Glacier. It's actually covered with snow, so the ice is not fully exposed. Most of the glaciers are quite easy to walk on. The surface is a bit rough, especially when it's like a bit melting. You'll have some rubble, some rocks. As long as the gradient is not too steep, walking on a glacier, as long as there are no crevices like deep cuts, it's quite like pretty easy, I would say. Next one. Then you have snow, of course. Snow. As I learned a lot this year about snow, which I didn't got exposed to last year. Last year we didn't have a heavy winter. This year there was a lot of snowfall in Himachal, so a lot of exposure to different types of snow. You'll have different gradients. You'll have different softness of snow. Snow can be hard in the morning after the night has frozen it often. Has frozen it hard in the late afternoon. Snow can become very soft and start melting. So here you can see some soft recent snow, actually not like last winter snow, but recent snowfall. So we're in the Solang Valley, Biskund. So sinking in this again is quite effort intensive. Here you can see the Chorasi Pass. So shepherds are going steep down from the Chorasi Pass into the valley. So it's typically too steep to get down straight. So most of the time people will go like contour a little bit, try to reduce the slope and cut footsteps into, if the snow is soft, you can use your shoes actually to cut inside and then find your way down. So here, this is Indrahar Pass, even at this year at somewhere in June, this is only like, I think this is just 4,200 meters or something, but even in June this was still like covered with this frozen ice gullies. So these are like steep snow sections below the pass, where you can actually not cut, it's still frozen the snow, so here actually we have to use an ice axe to cut steps, and then we could actually walk over this. Without steps actually you'll simply slide down like a couple of 100 meters and that will be the end of it. Then you have crevices, right? Some glaciers are pretty even surface, they are not really heavily melted. Some glaciers will have these cuts, deep cuts, where in case you fall down in those, again, that will be the end of it. So you always have to be careful of these cuts in the glacier, especially in this is now exposed. But if there's like a thin layer of fresh snow on top of this, you might not see this, but you, of course you will still fall inside. So sometimes you might be needing to use ropes to safely cross this and go as a group, obviously. This is the Kangla Glacier. So again, solid ice, but ice is fully covered by snow in the month of July. So sometimes pretty easy to walk across this. Sometimes, say when the snow is soft, you sink in till your hip and it becomes very, very intense to progress. And sometimes close to the pass, typically when it gets steep, you'll have to sometimes use poles or use an ice axe to pull yourself up. There's the Gaj Pass over Indrahar. So again, like very steep, typically towards the pass itself. This is the Gaj Pass. On the other side, you will have Dharmasala. Here you have the Chamba Valley. So here, lower in the valley, it flattens out, but closer to the pass, typically, you cannot go straight up. You'll have to kind of make like a left or a right approach to have like a less steep gradient to access the pass. And obviously, streams make an important part of your trek planning. Most of these streams are like when they start up, all these streams, these can either be caused by rains, or many of the streams are actually simply glacial meltwater, like snow melt or ice melt on the higher ranges here. So higher up, okay, the streams are typically less, right, because that's where they get born, that's where the melting starts. But once after 10 kilometers down the valley, the amount of force that the water picks up from different side valleys, some of these glaciers are like the size of Adyar or the size of Besanagar. So by mid-afternoon, if a strong sun at 4,000 or 5,000 meters, you can imagine the intensity of the sun beaming on that ice. So the amount of meltwater you get from such a huge pack of ice can be huge. And once you get down the valley, when the amount of water is more, most of the time you cannot cross these streams. So knowledge about bridges again becomes essential. Then where can you cross the valley from one side to the other side to connect to the next pass? Here you can see a typical gorge in Ladakh, and Palani, who is trying not to get flushed away. So in Ladakh, have a highly erosive landscape there. You don't have rain, but you have a lot of meltwater in the month of July and early August. So because that water gets squeezed in very narrow passages in gorges and canyons, the force of the water can be very high. So crossing these streams again becomes a big challenge. Okay, and then landslides. So here you see Neil, one of the guys joining me in early on. Trying to scale like a pretty steep place, right, where the topsoil has been taken away by probably some rains, unusual rains, so the whole top layer is removed, and then you have loose soil and a little bit of remaining ice and snow present there. No trail anymore, the trail has been washed away. So crossing those sections can take a lot of time and can be very dangerous, obviously. Here you can see another landslide somewhere in Badabangal, in Chamba Valley, Barot Valley, where me and Tanga were like almost mountaineering to cross some of these sections. So here you can even see that the entire forest, normally the trees hold the soil very well, but in this case, this happened last year actually, because I crossed the section in 2018 also. So here actually for 500 meters and some 300 meters width, the entire mountain came down actually, and it's not solid rock. There's all loose rocks there and soil that make it very difficult to traverse. And so again, as I said, sometimes you're really looking for those little bridges. Again, many of these bridges are not permanent. They also get washed away when you have certain years of heavy water currents in the stream. Sometimes the bridges are made again, so that's not done by the government because that's in the middle of nowhere. So local people, local shepherds, villagers who use these routes might be repairing these bridges just with a couple of trees and logs. So sometimes you really have to search for these places where you can cross the stream. This year very helpful, so we had a lot of landslides this year because of the rain. But sometimes it's useful, we also had a lot of snowfall last winter. So even this is taken in August somewhere near the Kalihini Nala, Bengal. So a lot of the streams get covered by lots of snowfall that gets compacted, becomes like frozen snow or almost thick ice. And many of these places actually even at like 3,000 meters still were intact at the end of the summer. They didn't simply melt. And as a result actually you can actually walk across the streams or cross the streams through those frozen snow bridges. But again, you need to take care because these are like heavy. Some of these bridges are like 10 meters of solid ice, which are very heavy. And as they melt above the stream, they start collapsing and you get these big kind of mini crevices, which are a little bit tricky, of course. And glacial lakes. So here you see the Kalihini Glacier covered by snow, which is melting. Again in August, still not fully clear. Last year this glacier was fully exposed, now it's still full of snow. So the summer was not enough to get rid of the last winter snow, even risk the lives on this lake. So most of the time you get these rivers that start from glaciers, but in some cases because of landslides and a lot of boulders blocking the flow of the water, you'll get these natural lakes below the glaciers, which are like sometimes very beautiful and scenic. A couple of slides of typical shepherd routes. This is the, I think, Margu Pass, one of the routes between Kangra Plains and Chamba. So again, you can see, right, this is like pure rock climbing. There is no real path there used by shepherds. But you can see, and that shepherds, here you can see a plain rock. Nobody has stepped on this. Here you can see a lot of loose soil and a little bit of goat poop and pee. So you can actually find the way that zigzag through this all the way to the pass. You can kind of find the way that the shepherds have opened the route because, yeah, obviously there is no clear trail available. Same thing here, we already discussed. So closer than to the passes, typically shepherds don't go up straight. They go from the side of the pass. Straight is too steep. So they will be cutting these passages to whatever is still covered with snow to reach the pass. Again, this is a beautiful picture to give you a typical idea of a shepherd pass. This is the Darati Pass, which connects Chamba Valley at this side with Tindi village in Lahore and Pangi Valley or Chinamp River Valley. So this is around 4,000 meters also, I think. Between Darati, 4,000 meters, and between the alpine meadows where you finally get a firm foothold and you're not scared to die if you slip. So between these two, there's around 1,000-meter vertical drop. So this is like very, very steep. It's almost like a vertical rock face. And if you see, the shepherds actually are able to find the route, zigzag through small passages. It will go left, right. Easy to miss the route to eventually, then they will go get on these snow ridges. Again, they will cut through the snow to actually cross those sections. So none of this is documented again. You don't find GPS logs, there are no blogs about it. So the only thing you can do is, after the first shepherd goes through it, you can try to find the way by following the poop of 500 sheep, finding the footsteps. And so in this case, I actually came from the other side. I got stuck here completely at the vertical drop, not able to figure out the route anymore. Even though sometimes 1,000 sheep go through over these rocks and these passages, still sometimes in several cases you'll completely miss the trail. They will completely disappear into thin air. And then luckily the next morning some shepherds came up from this side and I could figure out the way actually to come down, seeing them climbing up. In this circle also there are actually 500 sheep here on the way up, but it's so huge of course that you can hardly spot them. So these kind of passes are like very beautiful, but at the same time quite challenging. Again, this is typically how they zigzag, right? So you'll have these vertical drops everywhere, here, there. So they're basically zigzag, finding small openings through the cracks and the rocks to kind of descend that with trying to manage that huge crowd of 1,000 sheep with like 5 shepherds and another 5 dogs. To get them in one line sometimes. Just imagine 1,000 sheep. That's like 1 kilometer long line, one after the other, because it's only one can go at a time. That's like an amazing sight actually to see these people coming down and managing this huge crowds. Oh, okay. Now here you can see another part of the Margu Pass over the Pit Panjal, and you can see here there is some kind of trail through very steep rock faces, through the gullies where you have to be careful not to slide down on the way to the pass. So like very extreme routes are used by these guys. Okay, so this is the terrain section, gives you an idea of the kind of types of terrains you come across, right? Not the typical things you will come across if you go with a commercial group, but once you go to explore like lesser known, lesser frequently used routes, it will become a little more challenging and dangerous. So what are the kind of gears that we use now, again, to manage this terrain? Yeah, so first of all, of course, your shoes. If you cross 100 hikers, 98 hikers will not use this. 98 hikers, they will use big boots. They will be very proud, waterproof, they will say. Waterproof also means that if you go through the stream or if you get into rain, that the water will stay inside. You'll get blisters. It will become heavy. It will not be very nice for your feet. Okay, they are like breathable, they say, but it will be still quite hot in hot weather. So again, having a background thanks to Selva, of an ultra runner, we go more for trail running shoes, lightweight. This is just 230 gram, this shoe. Forget about the brand, doesn't matter. So lightweight shoe, breathable, so very comfortable in hot climates. Can be very hot and intense, the sun. Very comfortable to cross the stream 20 times. Sometimes walk through the water. You don't have to remove your boots. Just walk through it. 5 minutes later, it's dry. Very comfortable, breathable for the feet inside. And then, of course, the sole is very important. You need to have a very rugged sole, very high abrasion sole that gives you extreme good grip on rocks, solid rocks, loose rocks, landslides, and all the kind of terrain you saw there. So this is my preferred type of hiking shoe. It doesn't give you the same protection as a boot, obviously, but again, being minimalist and being a runner, it will be much lighter and more comfortable as per my experience. Next. So again, unusual. Most of the hikers who go in full pants with jackets and all that stuff. Again, as you go light, you can go pretty fast. You're not really running, but you're going like easily at 3 times the pace of the average hiker. That's what I saw on an average. So that means going fast climbing up fast on these things. That means your body has to breathe. If you put on those jackets, puff jackets, rain jackets, you're going to simply suffocate. You'll not be able to let your body transpirate or breathe. So people always look weird when I go with shorts and very thin t-shirts. But this will really allow you to breathe. Of course, you cannot sit here then for too long on top of the pass. You're quickly going to get cold if it starts raining or snowing or it's a cold breeze. But as you're in action, as you keep moving forward, like a light breathable base layer is very good. It's very comfortable in hot weather. It's very comfortable when it rains. It dries quickly. It's very comfortable to breathe when you're going fast. And it's again light. Okay, on top of this, of course, we can layer up. So in case it starts raining, so if it rains in Chennai, it's pleasant. We go outside and we enjoy the wetness. It's a nice warm rain. If it rains there, it's not pleasant. It's very cold, especially above 3,000–4,000 meters. It's dangerous because you can easily get undercooled, especially rain combined with cold winds. So you need to protect yourself. The rain jacket is one of the most important gears in your gear set. So good rain jacket, typically a hoodie that will actually prevent you from getting wet from the neck. So if it really gets cold towards the higher passes, then you can layer up again. You can put like a bivy or a fleece. You can layer up the rain jacket on top of that. That will actually keep you warm. And then in the night, you'll see later on, you'll start layering up with more things. Butt jacket, sleeping bag, and a couple of other things. We'll come back to that in detail. Okay, and then, so other important gears, I kept it minimal in terms of technical gears, but very essential I feel are poles. Hiking poles have 3 purposes. Many people actually use hiking poles full time because hiking poles, reduce some of the impact on your knees, especially going steep down. There is a lot of impact on the knee, just climbing up. So with the hiking pole, actually, you can transfer probably some 20–30% to your upper arms. You also have like 4 points of contact, which will give you much more stability, especially like when crossing streams. We have 2 feet, right? And as you walk in that strong current of water, every time you lift one leg, you only have 1 point of contact. And these streams are not flat. They are not like a flat surface. They are like full of loose rocks and boulders. So as you stand on one leg with heavy current of water coming and like an uneven surface, it becomes very difficult to stay upright and not get flushed away. So having like at least 1 stick or 2 poles gives you a lot of stability, at least have more points of contact. Next one, and then again, whenever you have a steep snow section, especially when the snow is hard in the morning or early summer, then it's easy to slide down if you don't have extra support. Next slide also, so you can see, right, this is Anbu, our birthday boy today. So this is the Sari Pass. last year very easy. There is a trail below it, nice rhododendron bushes. Same time last year, same time this year, it's fully covered still by snow in the month of June, I think, mid-June. So going over this, you can cut a little bit in the snow. It was a little soft in the afternoon, but still having a couple points more of contact, just like an animal who has 4 points of contact, makes it much more stable and less likely to slide down and die in the valley. One of the most versatile tools that I used this year was the ice axe. So when the snow is soft, you can manage with your shoes and with poles. But when the snow becomes steep and when it's hard, especially in the morning, then cutting steps, next slide. Okay, it's not there. We have seen it previously, right? Cutting snaps will allow you to actually cross some of these snow gullies, which remain there for pretty long, even till midsummer. They don't easily melt because they are like in a gully, so that snow actually remains out of the sun. There is no 90-degree angle of sun warmth on that gully, so even till mid-June you find a lot of these steep sections where the trail is underneath like a snow gully and you need to cut through to be able to make it. Okay, so that's terrain and basic layers, basic gears. Now let's talk about the weather. Weather is like a very important factor, and weather I think is one of the most riskiest thing in the Himalayas. If you're going to die, mostly it's going to be of the weather, I think, more than the terrain. Okay, so basically you are at a high altitude. So whenever you are up there, close to the ranges, close to the peaks and the passes, you can easily see that the weather actually gets created near these places. The interaction between the atmosphere and those snow peaks, there is like a constant something going on that creates clouds, then the clouds disappear. So I mean, there is a very fast changing kind of weather pattern there, very unpredictable. That's typically why you will cross those passes in the morning when the weather window is a bit more stable. Towards the afternoon, late afternoon, you don't really want to cross a pass because that time the weather can be very unpredictable and you can easily get stuck in some nasty weather. Once you get stuck like in rain and wind there, the rain and wind is very pleasant here and at sea level, but becomes very unpleasant and very life-threatening at those higher altitudes because without proper protection, you're very exposed and everything is more extreme. Winds are harder, rain, hazel, snow quickly makes you undercool if you don't have proper protection. And because it's so fast changing, sometimes once you're with like your dry fit t-shirt and before you know it, the weather changes and before you can put on your rain jacket and a warm puff jacket, it's already raining or you're already getting ice from the sky. And then of course whiteout. Sometimes you'll have dense fog and clouds so that you're actually, if you look at the next slide, you hardly see anything. This is when we were passing the Kaligini Pass. You have white snow, you have like the view is completely blocked by mist and you're actually kind of disoriented. You don't see the trail also because it's covered by snow. So it's easy to get disoriented and get lost when you get into these whiteouts. So that's also one of the reasons that sometimes it's better to carry some extra food or have a proper shelter so that you can pitch up and be safe and have enough food for the weather to clear up. So how do we protect ourselves against the weather? So this year I was kind of lucky. There was a guy in Usefa, a nice guy from Manali, Himachal, who gave me one of his self-made quilts. A quilt is like different than a sleeping bag. A quilt is actually open at the bottom. You will actually sleep directly onto your mat and you will just have cover from the sides and the top. So it's like open at the base. So they keep it open because technically speaking, isolation only works when it's not compressed. So if you lie in a sleeping bag, the sleeping bag below you will be compressed and will completely lose its insulation properties basically. So that's why quilts are actually better, so they don't cover you fully because you don't need to cover from the base. On the base you will be kept warm with the mat. And I think because of that it will be less material, less weight than a sleeping bag. So this quilt was quite amazing. It's just 650 grams and it has actually kept me warm and very comfortable at even pretty extreme places this year. One place a bit further. Next. Yeah, previous one. Thank you. This is one of the higher places I camped. This is the Kangla Glacier. This is 5,500 meters. So here I camped at 4,900 meters. There was nothing but snow there. I could only find a couple of rocks and some boulder actually to keep me dry. It started raining and also keep me out of the wind. But this thing actually was enough to even survive a night early July at almost 5,000 meters without any tent. I didn't carry a tent this time. Tent is pretty heavy, and even without using my BV also. So out of 120 days, I think 80 plus % of the time I was actually sleeping on the open, just in the sleeping bag, no tent and no other protection. So a good sleeping bag really, if you go back then, it gives you a lot of advantages. It's very light and it's actually pretty comfortable. So this is amazing. I mean, -5 degrees, because if you go to Decathlon to shopping for something at this level, and many brands actually, I think you'll easily end up with like a 2-3 kilogram bag, very bulky, very difficult to carry. So a big sleeping bag and a big tent are like the two things that actually start dragging you down most of the time. Next. So one thing that you wanna, if you go to the next slide, one thing, rule number 1 with camping actually, which eliminates the need for a tent. If it doesn't rain actually, you can eliminate the tent by always finding a place out of the wind. If you break the wind at these higher altitudes, wind is actually the one that constantly pulls down your body temperature in the night. So if you find a boulder, a wall, a forest where you camp, you can actually sleep quite comfortable. Next one. So if it rains, say you typically, even then I used to find natural places like caves. Next one, boulders, to actually sleep in the open and be safe from the weather elements. Next. Like in Ladakh, you have a lot of these deserted villages. If you look at a big map of Ladakh, I bought one of these big maps with a lot of passes documented on that. 50% of the villages in Ladakh, we'll talk about that later, have been deserted. Nobody stays there anymore. They're now into ruins, but they're still useful, I mean, as shelters for the night. So some of these broken houses also give you protection from the rain. You got these big shelters, like these are like rock igloos, mostly built by the shepherds, I think. Inside view, outside view. So indigenously constructed so that it doesn't fall down. It actually, the weight and the force goes towards the inside. And very comfortable. I mean, once you get inside this, you're pretty safe from even wildlife. And you're also completely out of the wind, so comfortable to stay. For the times when I was really had no other choice of camping in the open, so exposed to either wind or rains, I used this BV. So after the quilt, actually the BV was the second best thing that I had in my bag this year. BV is like a mummy. It's like a mini tent with a small little carbon pole here that keeps the tent standing on top of your head. So once you sleep inside this, you can easily read a book or you can do some work and a little bit of blogging on your phone. It's quite comfortable. Of course, when it gets wet, it's cold, it doesn't protect you, but then if you put a sleeping bag or a quilt inside this thing, again, you're isolated from any cold from the outside. So out of 120 camps, I think only maybe 15 or 20 times I would have used this. But the nice thing about this BB basically is, to come to the point, is it's just 500 gram. So 500 gram is a huge weight savings compared to the usual tents which everybody seems to use everywhere. I go and I pass hikers, and the first thing that people see, oh, that's a little bag, where is your tent? But then basically I'm carrying the small BV, so which makes it much lighter and faster and with all the benefits. Basically you lay it up, you put the BV which cuts out the wind and the rain, waterproof. Then you have your quilt, then you have your pump jacket, and then you have 1 or 2 t-shirts under that. So instead of that pen and a lot of big things, you just simply lay it up as a minimalist. And this also has kept me warm, and I've slept in some very bad rains in the open. Not a problem at all. You're pretty comfortable and warm with these 4 layers. Okay, let's talk a little about foods. Food is very important, obviously, because you're in the middle of nowhere there, sometimes days away from any village where you can resupply. Food very important also because as a minimalist, if you look at those expeditions with 5 horses, they will carry 3 weeks of food with them, so they are completely independent. They can go anywhere. They don't have to resupply in the next village. But as a minimalist, you cannot carry like 2-3 weeks of food. It adds a lot of extra weight. You'll have to start carrying cooking stuff and all that gases and burners, which will get you back to a huge backpack. So let's talk a little about food. Yeah, first let's talk about water. Water actually has never been a problem in the Himalayas, even in Ladakh, which is supposed to be a high altitude desert. So most of the time you will always find like nice side streams coming from the ranges above. Typically you will not drink from the mainstream as the amount of water force also typically takes along soil and becomes a little muddy sometimes. But I would say every 2-3 hours you easily cross one of these side streams with crystal clear water. Even in late summer when you're far beyond the winter and stuff, you will still have melting snow and glaciers that give you a continuous flow of drinkable water. Many of the Europeans that I saw carry this light straw, that tube that you suck through, which does has a nano filter to basically filter out impurities and bacteria and all that stuff. But I think I've been drinking pure water directly from the stream for 4 months, and you can really feel, drinking from those streams, different valleys, lower, higher, directly from the snow actually, where the snow starts melting. The water is so nutritious, has so many natural minerals and even natural bacteria that really are also very positive for your digestive system, I would say. I typically have trouble here pooping in Chennai city with that dead water. That water has been chemically processed and filtered. The water you drink there actually stimulates your digestion, and you will have like a proper daily bathroom in the morning and all that stuff. So you also feel hungry actually because it helps in digestion. So very good. So before we even come to resupplying your food, whether it's Uttarakhand, Himachal, or even in Ladakh, middle of nowhere, you will come across a lot of hospitality. So yummy dishes. Food never tastes better when it's prepared than when it's prepared with love. When you get into a place where they show genuine hospitality, not commercially like most of the touristic places. So when you get invited into somebody's home or shelters or temporary camp in case of shepherds, you get these freshly made rotis with all kinds of sabjis, fresh ghee, fresh goat milk. That gives you so much nutrition and so much good nutrition to replenish these 6,000 to 8,000 calories you lost climbing up 2,000 meters and cross sometimes 30 to 40 kilometers in a single day. So hamlets, Himachal, Uttarakhand is pretty easy with respect to food, because mostly within a day, especially again if you go minimalist and fast, you will always end up in a village and you will always find a little dabba where you can get food. So that again makes you more light. You don't have to carry food with you. You don't really need to cook, because at the end of the same day or maximum the second day, you will have freshly cooked food in the next village. Beyond the last villages also, during the summer, there are these farmers, or there are these cattle herders which go with their buffaloes, sheep, shepherds, go grazing the high meadows, which are normally closed in the winter. And during the summers you will find these guys from the lower villages who go up there and who are typically treating you with unseen hospitality. Then of course the shepherds are like, I would say, the gods of the mountains. These guys navigate these places like nobody else. They go in the most remote valleys. You'll find them, it's amazing because you'll find them where you would least expect it. Of course, wherever it's alpine meadow, when they can graze their herds, sometimes very steep sides of the valley. And as soon as these guys see you, especially towards the end of the day when they are done with grazing, when they are settled at their campsite, they will invite you for tea, then after that it's dinner, and after that they will pour some nice buffalo milk and your dal sabji, so they will give you And the rotis they make is like uncomparable with the rotis you will get in a shop here. It's so thick, so fluffy, and it's so yummy. You'll hardly eat 2-3 of those, and you'll be full. So you don't speak the language, but you quickly see that friendly face, that friendly smile, that inviting. They are also staying. They also know, right? They're staying in a very barren, remote place. They actually see nobody there because these are non-touristic places. So as you come there, sometimes as a solo traveler in the middle of nowhere, they will immediately showcase you amazing hospitality. Next. So far all the food has come for free. Hospitality, statistically speaking, out of 120 days, 120 evenings, easily 40% of the time you'll end up in somebody's place, somebody's shelter, some shepherd. So 40%, which means almost 50 nights I've not had the need to cook or use my own food. I always end up with somebody who feeds me. Because you're in remote, unexplored places, one of the benefits. But then when you need to refuel in the villages in between, you get yummy foods there, like my favorite, fried momos, mutton momos. You have this tukka, like a soupy noodle with meat, or some nice rotis with nice ladu gravy. So whenever you are in a village and whenever you have been burning a lot of calories going fast and climbing a lot, you'll definitely, it's very important to have good nutrition and good sleep every evening, so you can, otherwise you won't be able to sustain this kind of pace over a longer duration. In addition to that, there are a lot of natural things, especially in the month of August and beginning of September, like apple overload in Himachal, Chamba Valley, especially in remote villages where they cannot sell them because it's too much transportation and they are disconnected actually from society. They will actually let the apples fall from the tree and rot. So you can carry like 5 apples with you, and that will give you so much nutrition to keep on going. You'll have these small little peaches. Early in the summer you'll find little small wild strawberries. So all that stuff is available for free. Next slide. As I mentioned, in case you run out of food, there are a couple of plants. There's like a flower kind of plant. There's like something even we have in Europe. My mom had a similar thing in the garden, used to make jam out of that. This comes in the alpine meadows of Himachal, a typical plant, which all these things are edible. If you have a little bit of knowledge about mushrooms, which ones are edible. So you'll find a lot of food actually in the forest itself or in the meadows. Some of these things grow like almost near the top of the passes in Ladakh, where you would least expect vegetation or anything that you can eat. So some of this actually even gives you like juice, so even if you're out of water, you can suck on this to replenish your fluids. Well, and then actually, so out of 120 days again, 120 nights, I never used to cook, especially in the beginning, until Mr. Palani joined me and started cooking. Then I also got addicted. So in case, say in Ladakh you're in a bit of a bigger landscape. There you might have 5-6 days of no man's land before you come to the next village. So what do you eat for 5-6 days? Eventually, I planned initially to carry like a lightweight stuff, 400 grams, carry another 600 milliliter of fuel. It's again 1 kilogram, so I eventually decided to ditch that. As you will see, you can actually cook most of the time with natural materials and a little bit of kerosene to make your fire. But as you actually say, go for 6 days. First 2 days, if it's just 2 days to the next village, you don't have to cook at all, because as I said, you will have freshly cooked food 1 or 2 days later, so there's no point. And for 1 or 2 days, you can pack up some aloo parotas, you can even carry momos, chow mein. In this kind of climate, high altitude, cooler climate, if you pack it well out of the light, out of the airtight a little, your food will easily, packed food, fresh foods, which will be more nutritious than supermarket foods, easily goes for 24 to 36 hours, so 1.5 days. And then the second day, evening again, you end up in the village again, where you can have fresh food. So only beyond 2 days, I typically started cooking. And then if we go to the next slide, so cooking actually, not saving 1 kilogram of that stove and fuel. Cooking was mostly possible, obviously in Uttarakhand, Himachal, you're in the forest, so you always find food. But then in Ladakh, where there is no forest, there are no trees, there are sometimes no bushes. So there actually you start collecting these horse dung or wild yak poop, not fresh one, but a little bit dry one, which you mix a little bit of kerosene with that. So you carry like a little bottle of 100 ml, 50 ml kerosene, you soak it a little, you lighten it up, and that will actually give you a nice sustained flame suitable for cooking. Again, without that extra weight, you just start collecting this shit 1-2 kilometers before the place where you're planning to camp, and that will give you the fuel needed to cook actually. So, and then most of the time I think this is a good option. I mean, you can carry anything to cook, but this is quite a nice one. White oats, so like a daba of 500 grams actually allows you to cook 5 meals. So 100 grams of oats mixed with water, you don't even need milk. You boil that for a few minutes, and you get some pretty nutritious and high energy foods that hey, you can start cooking like either morning, or you don't want to cook midday, either morning or evening. When you settle down in the campsite, you can spend some time making a fire and cooking some of these oats. So 500 grams or even 1 kilogram of oats will again give you another couple of days. And then for lunch, typically I used to carry like peanuts, chocolates, even like ready to eat noodles. Which again, they were an easy way to resupply the calories you lose. Peanuts have, peanuts and chocolates especially, sugar and carbs which you lose are easily replenished with those. Next. Yeah, so this is also important. I think we need to spend a little time on people. So the people, which are the kind of people you meet in the Himalayas. So next, obviously you have these amazing villages. I mean, typically the last village, especially in the valley where the road ends or even where the road doesn't reach, where electricity doesn't reach, where mobile signal doesn't reach, you'll come across some amazing like things which have been taken from like a fairy tale kind of book. Beautiful wooden houses built with natural material, wood, stone, like those clay stone kind of clay sheets on top of the roof. So very beautiful, very amazing to stay in those wooden houses. Like. Next. And the nice thing is, I mean, I closed 340 villages, passed through 340 villages, but I've seen like thousands of villages around me in those valleys. I crossed probably 120 plus valleys, 120 passes, and in every valley, when it's inhabited, you'll find like tens of different hamlets, sometimes just 10, 20 houses. And all these villages will actually be connected obviously with paths, because people want to go to the bigger towns and also supplies, get their supplies. So, I mean, even if you don't want to do like these extreme hikes over higher altitude passes, there are like thousands of very beautiful villages in numerous valleys. I'll complete my list of valleys in that slide that was in progress, where you can easily follow clearly laid out paths, beautiful paths, and that are really worth visiting, because the kind of people, the kind of beautiful houses you see there is really really an amazing experience. Next. Right. So you don't speak the language, I don't speak Hindi much, but then you can directly see the friendly faces that welcome you, and if they again see you, I mean, if you're gonna enter that village, if you're gonna budge in that village with 10 people, of course, they're gonna think twice before hosting you or giving you food. But if you're in a small group or even solo, then people are extremely friendly. Again, these are the kind of houses you see there. I mean, staying with those people in those kind of houses is amazing, very beautiful, and it's amazing to sleep on those wooden floors. Very warm, very comfy. Next. Beautiful. I mean, some parts of Uttarakhand and Himachal, it's really beautiful. They will keep their animals at the base, ground floor. They will have their granary, where they keep all their grains for the entire, to survive the entire winter. And then people actually stay on the first and the second floor. So this will also be useful, because in the winter this might actually be buried under 8 to 10 feet of snow. So very beautiful houses. In addition to the houses, they are quite religious there. They live in harsh conditions. They have a harsh life sometimes, disconnected from the rest of the world in winter. So they are pretty religious and make these beautiful, not Uttarakhand that much, but more in Himachal, not also in Ladakh, but especially Himachal has amazingly, beautifully handcrafted wooden temples, which are like sometimes very ancient. Next. Like some of these temples are like maybe more than a century old. Next. Then you will also come across these seasonal villages. So this is like Ralam village at 3,600 meters in one of those valleys that leads towards the border with Tibet. You normally need a permit to come here because the Indian Tibetan border patrol, ITP, will be checking for an line permit to reach these places. So these are buried in snow in the winter, so people actually migrate to the plains to survive the winter, and then in the month of May or June, they're actually, when the houses appear from underneath the snow, they will come back. Sometimes if you go to the next slide, I think that's discussed later, sometimes they will use like 100 goats or horses or donkeys to carry all their food supplies for the summer to stay in those villages, and clothing. You also have these semi-nomadic people, so typically like buffalo cattle herders, which go in the high altitude meadows. They have a lot of nutritional herbs, medicinal herbs, fresh grass. If they graze their buffaloes, sheep, goats in those meadows, the quality of the meat, the quality of the milk will be so much better than what they get from grazing in the lower valleys. So they will be staying up there. Next one, you will have these villagers who stay up for a limited duration, like say a couple of weeks, to collect medicinal plants from the hills. And then they go back down with like these huge bags, 30 kilogram bags full of dried roots. And then of course, next one, the shepherds. The shepherds are staying in very temporary shelters. But again, beautiful. I mean, staying with these people is sometimes on top of the valley with awesome views below. And then in the night it's amazing sometimes. It's totally pitch dark, but then you can see in some of the side valleys, you see campfires or you see torches of other shepherds staying and grazing those meadows in those other valleys. So staying with these guys is always like amazing. I mean, these are like gods of the mountains and some of the most hospitable people that I've met. So without exception, they will always take care of you. They will guide you if you lose your way. They will feed you. They will protect you. These are the villagers typically. So here a guy smoking the hookah pipe. Next. Gujars again. So Gujars are like tribes, mountain tribes, which are kind of staying away from modern society. They will live very isolated beyond the last villages. They stay in beautiful again mud and wood homes, sometimes like built with huge logs of trees. They stay together with their cattle inside the same house, and they live fully independent. They can survive even if the global economy collapses. If you're all starving here with food, these guys won't even know what happened. They live nicely, sustainable with nature. They won't have any carbon footprint, obviously. They don't have electricity. They don't need anything basically, and they're happily grazing their herds. They have fresh milk. And they get there, of course, they will go to the village, I guess, for some salt and sugar and some other things. But otherwise, they're quite self-sustained. And these are some of the places they stay, like open for the smoke to go because they cook, they sleep. They have their animals in the same place. Next. But some of these places are amazing. You do like huge, 20-meter long, huge wooden trees. They are built like amazing constructions, very strong roofs. Sometimes the sheep in the night they will sleep on even the buffaloes, like 10 big buffaloes of 500 kilograms each will sit on the roof. Maybe a little bit of safety, right, from wildlife in the night. And you can see this wooden beam here. This will be the people living quarters, the kitchen. They'll have these nice kitchen cells with all their utensils. They'll have their beds. They'll have their supplies, and on this side, 50% of the house, the animals come inside in the night. Really take care of their own cattle. And this is typically, if you end up in these places after burning like so many calories, completely drained, walking 10-12 hours through bad weather, bad terrain, ending up in a place like this warm and with good food, there's no feeling like it. So here again, some of these nomadic tribes, again grazing their buffaloes. They take their whole families along with them. This is in Uttarakhand somewhere near the high ranges of Uttarakhand. So very friendly people, always helpful. They have very little, but still they will give you food. So absolute genuine hospitality without any expectations. Next. Like some of these same families. So I guess the kids don't go to school, they just take the kids along with them and they start doing the same thing as their parents have been doing for generations. Living in the plains, and then for 4 or 5 months they stay in the hills in like sometimes very beautiful shelters. And then of course the shepherds, as I already told, shepherds are like the guys you will find everywhere. So always good. I mean, it's always nice to hear in the distance the sound of sheep or goats towards the end of the day after 4 or 5 o'clock. Then you know you have a proper place to settle down for the day. Good food is waiting for you. So they go with these big herds of sheep. This is at the base of the same Darati pass, that steep drop which you saw, which is somewhere here. So at the Darati pass I saw like at least 10 shepherds, every shepherd having some 500 to 1,000 sheep, waiting in a queue to cross one by one from Chamba to the high alpine meadows of, in that case, Lahore actually, to graze and then come back before the end of the winter. Like in typical, you can see a lot of people are busy in those little hamlets. So a hamlet is beautiful. I mean, if you look at it from distance, you'll see dense forest. Then you'll see a village, 10, 20 houses, very nice little village connected with a path through the forest. And then around the village, you will see all these farmlands, all these terrace step plantations, because it's quite steep, where they typically harvest wheat or stuff to make rotis. And then whenever it's harvest time, everybody will be engaged, especially women. Women will do a lot of work in North India, I saw, where the guys are nicely relaxing at home on the first floor on their wooden house, chilling out, having a cup of tea. A lot of women carry a lot of stuff from the fields back home. After they work a day in the fields, you see them coming home and they start cooking again for the whole family. So quite amazing. And then not just food, but even clothing. Every house, I'm not saying in the big, I mean the more bigger towns and cities, but in those remote places, every house has their own loom, and everybody is actually making their own clothes, making their own blankets. So again, pretty independent and pretty sustainable. They actually grow their own food, they make their own clothes. The shepherds don't carry all these fancy gears, hiking gears that we carry, lightweight, fancy materials. They will be carrying their woolen blankets. They will be dressed in their homemade woolen clothes, woolen cap, very simple plain rubber shoes. So all these guys actually are like pretty much living independently from the rest of the world. Okay, so that is a little bit, about the people, the terrain, the weather. Now something on the journey. So now I'll just show a couple of pictures of those 4 different regions. I went through Uttarakhand in May, Himachal in June, and then once the monsoon set in, I spent like 1.5 months in Ladakh escaping the monsoon, but unfortunately, due to weather change this year, the rain followed me all the way to to Ladakh and Zanskar. So initially we started at Uttarakhand, somewhere at the border with Nepal, and then crossed the entire Uttarakhand, not going to those big, higher pilgrim places like Kedarnath and Joshimath and all those places, because in the month of May, still heavy snow. So I identified east to west on 30 passes at below 4,000 meters. And again, this is the kind of hamlets you find there. This is Kati hamlet in the Pindari Valley. This goes to the Pindari Glacier. Very scenic, very beautiful, as I told. They will be in the forest. Pretty much disconnected from the plains, from the main society, and they will have all these beautiful farm fields around the village to basically be completely independent, grow their own foods. So I don't want to show you too many maps, but a couple of fun maps at least. One, this is the eastern side of Uttarakhand, which is called Kumaon. Kumaon basically has this Nanda Devi real estate here. So I basically started from Darchulat, which is near the border with Nepal, and actually crossed it. All these red dots are passes, all the blue dots are villages, crossed over a lot of passes, ding, 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 ding. Through a lot of beautiful forests, and you can see lots of villages. So as I was telling, in Uttarakhand, there is never a need to bother much about food or shelter, because everywhere you will meet very, very friendly people. But unfortunately, or luckily I would say, many of these passes are unknown, so they are not touristic, and you really get treated with genuine hospitality. On the way, I went deeper inside towards the border with Tibet here, Dharma Valley, Ralam and Mailam Valley, and then the Pindari Valley, Pindari Glacier, to kind of go to some of these villages, which are semi-nomadic, right, which are buried in snow in the winter, and people in the month of May, they actually go with all their utensils and food and clothing back to those villages to stay. And then by Diwali, I think, or November sometime, they come back down to the plains. So they are like semi-nomadic. So, yeah. So a couple of typical pictures there, as I told. Next one, you got beautiful paths. Uttarakhand, we never had to scramble any shepherd trails or rocks or landslides. You're in the forests, it's pretty stable from landslides, and you get these beautiful ancient paths which must have been built hundreds of years ago. Very beautiful, but of course, none of this is actually documented anywhere. There's no blogs much available, not visible on the satellite map because it's inside the forests, but really amazing trails. Next. Like this is the famous Panchachuli, 5 snow peaks, high ranges on the eastern side of Kumaon. And below that we have these villages again which are buried in the snow during the winter. And when we went here to, this is in the Dharma Valley. Dharma is an ancient trade route between India and Tibet. It goes very deep inside. I mean, through 2-3 passes you can cross into Tibet. So these are like old hamlets along these ancient trade routes. This is Datu village, beautifully rock. I mean, here they don't use wood because they don't think there's much forest here. But you have these beautiful rock houses built from rocks and with these tiles on top. First week of May, we actually went to those villages where only the first villages were returning that time. So all the village was completely empty. They had closed all the windows and the doors to prevent wildlife and cattle sometimes, which stays behind, from entering the houses and taking away maybe rations. And people were slowly coming back one by one with their animals, with their household items, and coming back living in their villages. Like, nice experience. Here you can see some of those bigger goats which they use. They have these 2 sacks like saddlebag which you can keep on your touring cycle. And yeah, everyone I guess carries some 20-30 kilograms of stuff. So all these, one herd, I met around 2-3 herds which were carrying supplies to some of these, this is in the Ralam Valley, Ralam and Mailam valleys, where you will also find some very remote villages. I cannot imagine why they built a village so remote and so barren, actually, completely cut off in the winter. But probably, I guess this would have been in like an old trade route again, not used anymore after the China-India war. So they carry like all common supplies for the entire village, and then after these supplies are there, then the villagers follow one by one. Next. Uttarakhand again, early May, you have a lot of snow again. You have these passes. One side it might be clear, the other side, which is less exposed to the sun, you'll have a lot of snow. Steep snow means you need poles or ice axes to cross some of these. Next, and then again everywhere. Again, same formula, the less people have, the more hospitality. The richer people are, as soon as you go to bigger towns and bigger cities, you can see the faces changing of people. They have a lot of material wealth, but they would have lost their soul or their hospitality. As you go to these remote small villages in those hamlets where people have little, so here a old lady was cooking in a small shelter, which was also where the goat was staying. And immediately, as soon as they see you, they offer you some very nice food, actually. Next. Month of April, May, you get these beautiful rhododendron flowers in Uttarakhand. Pink, mauve, purple. You'll have yellow ones, you'll have deep red ones. Very beautiful contrast with the snow. Next. Again, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes very interesting. It's not like the snow melts evenly everywhere. Sometimes you will climb up one side, mostly snow-free, easy to go up. But then on the other side of the pass, they like say north-facing or west-facing, where you have less sun. Mostly during the morning, like east-facing or south-facing. That's where most of the snow melt happens. As you go towards Towards the north you don't have the sun, but even towards the west, the afternoon sun typically might not be very strong anymore because there might be some clouds coming that time. So north and west facing slopes, typically you will encounter still a lot of snow. Next, here again, a lot of shepherds all over Uttarakhand grazing their sheep. This is a nice puppy which we found in the middle of nowhere and which joined us actually for an entire week. A small, beautiful female dog, very nice breed. You get these beautiful dogs, a lot of variety in the dogs in the Himalayas. It's not like the one and standard street model that you find in Chennai. And again, like I was saying, like 340 hamlets passed. Out of 340, I can easily say 50 to 60 hamlets, nobody was there anymore. Of course, some are seasonal, so they will only return later in the summer. But many of the hamlets are actually broken down and abandoned. So you could actually see that not just in Ladakh, which is a pretty harsh landscape, pretty barren landscape, hard to survive, but even in the Himalayas, especially the ones that were built at higher altitudes, people have, especially the young generation has abandoned this lifestyle of farming and a self-sustained life and have all migrated to the cities for easy money and more comfort and more materialistic wealth, unfortunately. Pindari Baba is like an ashram in the Pindari, near the Pindari glacier. So this Baba actually stays in Bangalore. When we went to that place, he was also coming along. It's a pretty famous place, it seems a nice place. So that was Kuman, the east of Uttarakhand. And if we go to the west of Uttarakhand, it's continuously then. This is a place called Garhwal, so the northern side, where you have the Gangotri National Park. You'll have this Govind Pashu National Park, which borders Himachal. Uttarakashi is there, Sonpraya, Kedarnath, the famous temple is there. So again, you have all these pilgrim routes, and you'll have some high altitude passes, but not accessible in May. So we have continued our journey east to west over a lot of very beautiful low altitude passes all the way to Sankri and then into Himachal. So again, especially in the left corner towards the Himachal side, you will find amazing, beautifully carved temples there on the opposite of the side of Sankri, on the opposite side of the Kedarkanta peak actually. Nobody seems to be going there. So one of the most hospitable corners I've encountered. Every single house in every single village, they will invite you for food and tea. And you'll also find these beautiful lakes, really awesome. You can see the reflection of the snow peaks in the lakes. This is Tulital, somewhere near Rudranath next. And even though you're not walking on the high ranges of Uttarakhand in the month of May, and you're staying below 4,000 meters, many of the trails you're actually walking on in the lower Uttarakhand, you have clear views on these high ranges of Uttarakhand. So very stunning views, even though you're in the lower parts of the mountains. Again, beautiful homes, wooden homes, food and animals on the base. You'll have the granary at the base, and you'll have people staying on top. And everywhere as you come, people are just simply inviting you without a second blink. They're pouring buffalo milk, they're making you fresh food. It's really amazing. And then people are busy with harvest here. They will, you don't see much mechanized farming equipment obviously there, but a lot of manual labor and using animals to basically separating the grains from the things. Anyone had a question? I heard somebody. Okay.
How much weight did you lose?
Yeah, when I came back to Chennai after 4 months and after like 3,000 kilometers and 175,000 meter climbing, very weird, I was at the same 74 kilograms. So maybe I had a lot of hospitality and I think maybe a lot of fat got converted. I was a little bit lesser in the cheeks and a little bit skinny, but I guess maybe more bone mass or maybe more muscle because they're pushing it hard and going fast. But really, we had a lot of food. That is very important in between. You lose a lot of calories, but if you don't regain that, you can maybe go for a couple of days or a week, but you're not going to sustain for months. So that night rest as well as that regular nutritious food is very important to keep going.
And any special thing that you have lost after coming to Chennai?
Lost what?
6 packs or something.
Yeah, 6 packs. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this muscle, I guess, is also used, right? Because as you sometimes run down some of the trails from the passes, I guess the 6 pack is mostly used to keep the upper and the lower body together. As you hike, I don't think there's much of 6 packs building. But as a runner, yeah, I mean, this hasn't much changed much. I think we need to go to the gym probably to see more.
Any animal encounters?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. Wildlife. So, any other questions?
Was there any problem with the situation that is currently Kashmir and Ladakh?
No, Kashmir, I was disconnected from the news, especially in Ladakh. You never actually go. I don't go to Leh. I don't go to the Manali-Leh highway. I don't go to town, so I'm there for weeks and I don't have a clue what's happening. But then in Padum, Zanskar, I got to know that Modi passed some resolution. And but that side is far away from Srinagar, obviously, right? That part, Ladakh, I guess, which is part of JNK, is actually not really JNK. The people, okay, you could see a couple of cops on the road, but that was very peaceful. And again, it doesn't affect you because you're in the middle of nowhere. You're away from any possible cities or unrest. Okay, so other amazing place, but very difficult, very barren, not very hike much, no blogs available on the internet. The only thing you have is this PDF file by the Himachal Tourist Office, which you can download from the map, the website. This is the GHNP, Great Himalayan National Park. It's a beautiful, restricted, it's a protected biosphere and wildlife zone, very beautiful, very majestic mountains. It's basically on the right side of the Kulu Manali Valley. If you go to the right through Gusheni, then you come in this place. So it's on the top you have the Parvati Valley, on the top right you have the Peel, the high ranges of the Peel National Park, and on the right side you have the Kinnaur high ranges. So it's like in an isolated corner there. And actually very few people go there because if you look at the trails, it's here and there you really have to look twice not to lose the trail. So that whole place is actually 4 valleys, like a Palsham Ghat, the Tistan Valley, a Sage Stream, and a Jiva Nala, so which are actually all draining glacial meltwater from the high ranges of Peel, Parvati and Kinnaur into the Sage and the Tirthan rivers, which join the Bees rivers, which flows, drains the Manali Kulu Valley. So that's an amazing place. So here actually we came in through one pass from Kinnaur side, from Uttarakhand, Himachal. We jumped over and we actually crossed from one valley to the next valley to the next valley over some undocumented passes. So that's really a beautiful place. We can show you some pictures. So you have these very lush green valleys, beautiful streams running through forests. The trails are always a bit tricky because it's quite steep. So there are some beautiful trails there. I mean, you can go through the whole place through some amazing paths and trails. Next one, you can see these streams dropping down everywhere through lush green forest. Next, you'll find beautiful flowers. As I told you, you'll have countless flowers, all possible colors of the rainbow, and so many shapes. I mean, much more variety actually, I would say, than in European Alps. Yeah, which one? I'm seeing you.
Had a nice day.
Okay, very good.
But your communications were coming through all the while with photographs.
Okay.
It will go on ringing at any time of the day or night.
Yeah. See you later. Yeah. So I just took some pictures here, but I can show you lots of plant diversity. Many of them probably with a lot of medicinal properties that maybe only some of these elder people in those remote villages still know about. Next. So, and then one very interesting thing which defines the society in Uttarakhand and Himachal is this jungli nala. Jungli nala is a medicinal root. It's pretty costly. I think they're getting around 20,000 rupees for a kg. So there's high demand in China. So what happens is in May, June, when the snow melts from the passes and from these places where they collect these roots, you'll find a lot of young guys leaving the villages in the lower Himalayas, Uttarakhand, Himachal. They'll go and in search for these roots. So the village will be empty from young males. They will all spend 1.5 months in the Himalayas collecting these things, maybe getting enough weight bags to sell like 1.5 lakhs of these things. Then you'll have the guys from coming over the border with Tibet with lakhs of rupees, changing big sacks of money with big sacks of these medicinal plants for export to China. It's illegal, it's banned, but this happens through these passes that nobody can monitor much. And then 1.5 lakh is enough money then to chill out for the rest of the year for many of these places, obviously. Next, one other thing we found in these Great Himalayan National Park ranges is these huge rock crystals, like these beautiful, huge crystals, very heavy, beautiful with those flat sides. Some of them are more perfect than others. Like they're also collecting these things, and probably whatever is a nice one they can sell for quite a bit of money. Okay, so that's Uttarakhand. Then coming to Himachal. So Himachal actually, the next focus after the Great Himalayan National Park, right side of Kulu Valley, was towards the left side. So here we're going to the Dharmasala side. So if you see Dharmasala and actually Jogindranagar, so Kulu Mandi will be here somewhere. So here you will have like a beautiful range called the Dulado range, like a very long range all the way from Dharmasala, going above Jogindranagar and actually connecting with the Pir Panjal somewhere near Kulu. So you'll have a lot of passes here. These red dots are all passes across this Dulado range. So these passes are again used. Some of them are touristic hiking routes, right? Because Dharmasala is a bit of a touristic place. So these passes are well documented and trails on open street maps because they have been added by people hiking there. But some of these passes are also used by shepherds from, like say, Bajinath, Palampur, from the Kangra plains basically to migrate to the alpine meadows and graze the Chamba Valley. Chamba Valley will be actually behind this. So this is like a very steep mountain range rising up steeply from the Kangra plains and then descending into the beautiful Chamba Valley. Here you have Chamba, the main town, but you have a long valley beyond this leading all the way to Kuti and Barabangal villages, which are the endpoints of the Chamba Valley. One of the most beautiful valleys. If you want to do some easy and moderate hiking, you can just go through Chamba Valley, 100+ villages, small villages connected with beautiful paths, beautiful hiking options, less extreme. Like so here you can see the Dolador during a sunset from the Kangra plains. So Dolador itself has beautiful forests in the lower mountains, but then above those lower mountains you'll have those 4,500 meter high peaks rising up very sharply from the plains, so very clearly visible from the Kangra plains like Dharmasala and towns. And then Kek here, very lush green, not very known, but well documented on open street maps. You'll have a lot of beautiful trails going through these Dharmasala, like lush green forests, waterfalls dropping down obviously, carrying snow and ice, glacial meltwater from the Dolador ranges. Anbu there, see beautiful places, very lush green, beautiful to hike. And here you can see the top of Dolador. Here you can make the range that you saw on top. It's the same range here, so a lot of high peaks connected. So on one side, Kangra plains steep, 1,000 meter drop down, and on the other side you come, in this case, in the still snow-covered Chamba Valley, I mean the side valley of Chamba, where you also have a lot of holy lakes like this Landau, and some other lakes that the local villagers will visit in thousands of numbers later in the summer, like mid-August, when all the snow is gone. Nice. Beautiful villages, as I said again, natural materials, built from natural materials. The last villages, especially the first village that you meet when descending from a pass, first village, the most remote village, right, most far away from the main valley, will be beautiful in terms of construction, beautiful in terms of hospitality. Gujars, Chamba, when I talk about Gujars, mostly in Chamba you'll find a lot of these Gujars living disconnected from society into their own houses deep inside the forest. Like, and again, as I said, everybody seems to be, I mean, especially in the smaller villages, They don't bother about money much, so they don't bother about modern comforts yet. They just grow their own food and make their own blankets and clothes, so they're quite independent. You'll also find these ancient fountains, anciently carved fountains, like the village fountain, right, where you get the water for the village, related to some of the ancient tribes that were ruling those in previous centuries in the Chamba Valley. Well, then after, by the end of June, I was going higher towards 5,000 meter passes in the Pir Panjal range. Pir Panjal, so you go from Kangra, you go over Dolador, you get in the Chamba Valley. From Chamba Valley again, there will be a second range, 5,000 meters, 5,000 meter passes, but 5,500 meter peaks, called the Pir Panjal, which separate the Chamba Valley from the Lahore and Pangi, two different districts. Was basically one valley, or one Chandrabhaga, one Chenab river valley. Like one of the most beautiful valleys. If you're not, daring to go and climb the high passes, you can at least cycle or bike or hike through this Pangi valley. It's like one of the most beautiful valleys in Himachal, very less known. If you go on the Manali-Leh highway, you cross Tandi village after crossing the Rohtang Pass, you go through Tandi. If you take a left there, instead of going straight to Leh, take a left, you enter the Udaipur in Lahore, and you enter the Bangi Valley, like very, very beautiful, very majestic mountains. So that Pir Panjal range is basically totally non-touristic, very undocumented and unknown. And these passes are only crossed by the shepherds. The next slide. So these are the kind of guys. As I told, no fancy modern lightweight hiking gears, all homemade equipment, homemade blankets. These guys will be carrying like 20 kilograms of atta, 20 kilograms of rice on their backs, because they will stay there for months altogether. They have to feed themselves, they have to feed their dogs. Only the sheep can graze, obviously. And they will open the passes right early in the season, like beginning of July. And then they will go back again September, October, before the passes close again. Next. As I told, right, they don't follow trails, they just climb up straight on the mountains. So a little tricky to find these routes. If you go to the next slide, you can see very steep descents, all loose. You have to scramble through this area, and this is basically where good shoe with a good grip sole is really essential. You don't want to go there with your road shoes and die. And then to cross early at the beginning of the summer, when there is still a lot of snow, they will make these paths through those snow patches. This is a view on the Kalicho Pass, one of the most dangerous passes across the Pir Panjal. On an average, if there are 500 sheep here going in the summer, coming out in the winter, around 20 sheep will not make it alive because of they fall down or they throw rocks on each other. This is now an easy side, but then typically one side, either the Chenab River side, the Lahore side, or the Chamba side, it will like be very steep. So there it's quite dangerous to get down. Well, here you can see some of those steep sections, the Margo Pass, where they are zigzagging down. You can see hundreds of meters of sheep here, more than 1,000 sheep coming from all the way above there, from the Margo Pass, descending into Lahore. And then again, Mumbardar, one beautiful village near the Chaurasi Pass. Again, Gujars, unseen hospitality. Next, beautiful alpine meadows. As you climb up, you will see the color changing. Every flower, every species of plants will be comfortable at a certain altitude. So as you climb up, you can start in yellow, you can go through blue. Then this guy typically is at the higher altitudes, the red ones. So just below the snow, so it's like very beautiful to walk through these flowers. This is like a medicinal herb roots that were collected, big bags, like 7 villagers. Everyone will go home with 30 kilograms dried roots. They dry them to evaporate the moist, and only they get the lightweight, nutritious root left. Fill up big bags, and they carry that home with all their blankets and their other shelter. So these guys carry huge weights, and most of these guys are like older people, they are not young people. And then this is Mani Mahesh, the Sukdali Pass. You also have with Mani Mahesh, one of Shiva's 5 adobes in the Himalayas. So you have these yatra routes. These are actually beautiful routes, like well maintained, because more than 1 lakh of pilgrims go there every year. Within a short time frame, typically I think mid-August to the first week of September. Then they fix the path every year. You will have stay and food on top, so many of these guys just go with a day pack. There are regular places where they give you food. But some of these paths are also like very, very steep and beautiful. And then some of the villages along the way, they will host hundreds of people sleeping on top of their wooden balconies, giving food for free, stay for free. Okay, coming to the last part before you guys exhaust you guys too much. So after that, I started training in the lower Himalayas in July. So I escaped from the monsoon through the Kanglak Glacier, connecting Lahore with Zanskar. So Zanskar, most of the focus was here on this Himalayan National Park, a very beautiful, very remote place. So here you have some area, here you have Sachu on the Manali-Leh highway, and here you have Padum and Zanskar, some of you guys might know. So between these three, you have hundreds of passes. I did some 40, 50, but you have hundreds of passes here, some of them touristic, near the Matka Valley, the Stok Kangri is the famous peak there. Lamayuru is also quite famous. So this is quite touristic. You'll find your way easy because many tourists go there. You'll find a lot of horse poop. You'll find these cairns, stacked rocks to guide you along the way. But then as you go more interior, like between Zanskar and Lahore, Zanskar and Ladakh, between Lamayuru and say Padum here, you'll find some beautiful interior passes. Also between Zanskar and Sachu, along this Sarap River Valley, you will find some really very, very remote passes and valleys which are extremely beautiful. Like this is the typical landscape.
There is a question related to Stok Kangri. How much time you took to ascend and descend?
Stok Kangri actually was not planned because it's a bit touristic, so I didn't want to go there. So I thought that they would be charging 2,000 rupees for a permit. Normally I don't like to pay money to go somewhere for myself. But then I ended up somewhere at the base camp on my way, hopping passes from, if you go to the previous map, I was actually doing a big circle. I was going in one direction towards Somyuri and then coming back over another set of passes. I crossed on the Stok base camp there at 4,000 meters, and then talking to the Daba guy. I was out of food actually also. Talking to the Daba guy who gave me some food, he said, okay, it's probably worth doing. This year it's only 800 rupees for the permit, so then I said, okay, let's go ahead. I went up, and then in the next morning we just went up and down 5 hours to 6,200 meters. A little bit tough, not terrain-wise I would say, there was deep snow, but as a minimalist you don't carry much jackets with you. You have a light fleece, a light rain jacket, so going like starting at midnight, early morning hours still to see the sunset on top of Stok, which was amazing. You had an amazing view on the Himalayan National Park, but that was pretty freaking cold to be honest. So, and then you also don't carry technical gears. Many people use ropes and these big spikes to not slide down in the snow, but actually you can do it. I mean, if you're a little bit solid, you can do it without any gears. You just need a good shoe. Yeah.
One more, what kind of permission you had to take?
Except for Stok Kangri, which is just a local permit. There was a local permit which partly goes to the local panchayat, I think the Stok village below, where they receive all the shit and the food waste from the hikers above. So part of the money goes there, part of the money I think goes somewhere else. Apart from that, I actually never had to get a permit because I never went to the borderline. So given my current position also, I was also not able to go like to the high ranges of Uttarakhand or like say the other side like of Leh in the Nubra Valley and all that stuff. So all these inner passes of Himachal, Uttarakhand, even the inner passes of Zanskar, Ladakh, you don't need any permits at all.
And one more related to gears, how did you charge your mobile? Or,
Yeah, we'll come to charging and storage in a while. People keep sending questions online. We'll answer them all, if not now, after the session. So we'll just wrap this up a little quickly so that at least the majority of the audience who needs to be Diwali has the key thing covered. So if you go to Ladakh, you can see right high altitude desert So you're behind the Dolador, you're behind the Pir Panjal. So the weather, the monsoon cannot travel across these 6,000 meter high peaks. And these are all rain shadow areas actually. I mean, at least till this year when I saw that global climate is messing up that place also. But these are all like highly erosive landscapes, like you get these unearthly rock formations. You'll have these glacial streams which cut very deep canyons, gorges, very narrow gorges, so very risky. I mean, up till the mid-August, some of the currents, the stream water is very dangerous, and if there is not a bridge, you can forget it. There is no way to cross these streams, so if you need to go to the other side of the valley, it's impossible. You get these amazing textures and gradients. You'll have green rocks, red rocks, dark red, orange rocks. Like, so you're walking on a different planet sometimes, and as you go through a valley, as you go from one side to the other side, the landscape keeps changing actually. So this is all like typically above 4,000 meters. So quite intense. If it's sunny there, it's really sunny and high UV index. And then obviously everywhere with the proper irrigation from the glacial stream, you get these beautiful green patches in the middle of a very desolate landscape where people are farming in very, very remote places sometimes. Some of these villages like Dibling, here you can see Hanker on the base of the Kang Yatse 2 at the end of the Marka Valley, which is like sometimes days away from the nearest road section. So people have been able to transfer this landscape with proper irrigation in a very fertile and sustainable living habitats. But again, in the winter, this will be covered with snow. So people just have that summer window, right, to plant, to harvest, and then stock up enough food for the people and the animals to survive the next 6 months of winter. And this is like a typical beautiful Ladakhi house where the kitchen, the living room is like very beautiful. You'll have a beautiful display of utensils. You'll have this stove to keep the people warm to cook. And you don't have trees there, so they don't use wood. They will collect these cow dungs every day. And during the summer, you can see hundreds of dungs, pancakes actually, of yaks and cows and whatever grazes there. Whatever poops, they will collect it, they will stack it on top of the roof and use it then to warm themselves and more than that, cook themselves during the winter months. Here you can see some of those wild yaks which have been domesticated and which are used just like mules and donkeys to collect some of the materials to the village of Dibling along the Orna river. This is somewhere between Ladakh and Zanskar. So a village which is 2 days walking from whatever side you approach it, from either the Zanskar Padum or the Lamayuru side, or the other side there. So you need to walk 2 days, and I guess at an altitude which is not very comfortable in the winter. So the villagers leave that village in the winter, and then at the beginning of the summer they come back with all their materials and food supplies. They carry it on these big animals, domesticated yaks. Religion, again, people living in very harsh conditions, they are typically pretty religious. So Ladakh is all about Buddhism. This is like an 11th century monastery, somewhere again, very interior. You cannot imagine like 11th century how they would have created paths and trails to these very, very remote places and very inaccessible, right? Because you go through canyons and very inhospitable mountains with very landslide prone, eroded landscapes. So you'll find these very ancient heritage there. Next. Here you see Puktal Gompa, which is soon to be covered by a road, but also in previous decades used to be days away from any roadhead. Built beautifully across like one steep rock face. Probably very, very ancient, very interior to Zanskar. Next. And then you'll have beautiful, just like any parts of those places also in Ladakh, you'll have these beautiful local costumes. This was in a marriage in Yulchung, which I attended, like a 2-day non-stop party, good food and non-stop dancing, like a lot of this Kang local drink that they brew at home, served in liters and buckets actually. Well, here you see Lingchat, beautiful village again, very remote between Lamayuru and Padum, in the middle between Zanskar and Ladakh. So it's amazing, right? Better landscape again, and wherever it's a little bit flat, wherever it's farmable, people divert the glacial streams, irrigate, and are able to make these green farmlands to basically live in these settlements which have been there for like hundreds of years. Yeah. Now the government is doing a lot of effort, I think, because China is building a lot of highways on the other side of the border. Indian government has woken up and put a lot of roads and electricity to these remote places, which according to me is very expensive. Sometimes these villages are declining in population, only the elders stay there. Young people, as soon as they go outside to study, to school, they never come back. They don't want to come back, live this harsh lifestyle, be stuck there in the winter without any basic comforts, network, internet, electricity. So once people go outside, they never come back. They rather get a job in Leh as a driver, or they get a government job, or they get a job in the army. So many of these villages are actually on the declining. I don't think they will exist anymore in 10 years from now, but still government is putting so much money. Putting a road there, putting a road is fine, but every single year after rain, the landscape keeps living and sliding. They will have to keep repairing and maintaining that road, putting a lot of money into that. Here you see a typical Ladakhi marriage. Next, at the borders of these remote villages, you will find these prayer stones or money stones, which typically are put in large numbers at elevated rocks, rocky benches to kind of depict the borders of the village, and I think to basically, I don't know what's written, this is Tibetan, I think, written probably some prayers towards the gods to keep them safe in that barren kind of corners of the Himalayas. These are the typical cairns, they call it, stacks of piles of rocks. So they don't use paint, they don't use any specific indicators to mark the route, they will use these stacked stones. So finding your way in this rocky landscape, you just keep an eye on those stocks. Normally rocks don't end up naturally stuck on top of each other, but if you see a pile of rocks, you typically know you're on the proper route. So cairns, horse poop, as well as footsteps is the way to navigate through some of these places. Again, this is what I say, ghost towns. Some of these very, almost royally looking hamlets, beautifully built, 2 days away again from the nearest road. This is Satok, somewhere. You go from Sakchu on the Manali highway, if you take a left, before you go up to the Gata loops, you take a left in the Sarap River Valley. You walk for 2 days, you come in this place. This was once a very vibrant settlement, beautifully built, still in fairly good condition, but already partly in ruins because of the snow every year and then the water that starts seeping through the roofs, built with wood. So completely deserted, ghost towns. Everyone has left there. They didn't even bother to take their household items, their farming items. They just left everything behind in a hurry. In search for the city comforts, option 1. Option 2, maybe they have fled for the global warming, which has dried some of these glaciers and streams which were necessary to do farming in these desolate places. And that's what I'm telling, 50%, you buy a map of Ladakh, 50% of these hamlets you will find are uninhabited. You can even see in the legend of the map, you will have 100 villages, 50 of them, nobody stays there anymore. And the current 51s are probably also not going to sustain very long. So everyone is moving to the bigger cities, Leh, Padum, or on the Manali-Leh highway where they can get some money from the tourists, easy money. Nobody is interested anymore to take forward the ancient farmings. These places also, it looks very barren, but here there are like hundreds of farming lands, flattened places along the Sarap River where people used to do farming. And then, as I told, the BRO, the Border Road Organization, is building roads everywhere, even in places where it doesn't make sense. Now they are connecting Zanskar with Leh, Zanskar with Manali, through very inhospitable terrain. Must be costing huge amounts of money, not just to build it, but to maintain it on an annual basis, because they just put a tar road on there, and then 1 week later there are already rocks falling on top of that. So that's like a huge, never-ending pit of money that they spent to connect a village where of 10 houses where 2 elder people will still be staying. So I don't get it actually. Next. And then to connect some of these villages on opposite side of the canyons and gorges, you'll see these beautifully homemade, not homemade, I mean manually made bridges with woods and rocks, and no concrete, no things that we use in the flyovers in the city, all natural materials to sometimes span 20, 30 meters just with logs of trees and rocks combined. It's amazing, genuine engineering to cross some of these very dangerous canyons. Voila, and then, yeah, as long as you wait for the sun to be below the horizon, 3 hours at least, and if you don't have a moon yet up, then you get obviously beautiful views on the stars, because absolutely no light pollution, very dark skies, and you're at a very high altitude, 3,000-4,000 meters, so absolutely no atmospheric interference. Talking about wildlife, somebody was asking, so you'll find a lot. I mean, lower Himalayas, Uttarakhand, obviously you have a lot of forests, so you'll find forest stuff with like snakes sometimes. I only see one snake. But as you go to these higher ranges, when you talk about above 3,000-4,000 meters, there is no forest anymore, there is no place to hide, so you don't see too much of wildlife. Over 4 months, I've actually seen very limited wildlife, except for like a couple of these wild yak herds, which you see grazing, typically away from human habitats. They shy from humans. Here is like a pretty large cat species, probably a snow leopard near some stream. Here you have an ibex, which died, either through natural causes or which was attacked by some predator just 1 or 2 days ago. His flesh was still rotting. And then here a viper snake somewhere again, but that snakes obviously you're not going to find in those barren landscapes. You'll have to come down to the forest. But as you come down to the forest again, you'll quickly find gujars or villages, so you're pretty safe in the night, only at the higher ranges. Again, when you sleep with shepherds, no problem. If the snow leopards definitely roam there. You won't see them, but every shepherd will acknowledge that out of 500 sheep, easily 10 to 15 animals get lost every season to snow leopards, which come in the night. Right? That's why they have those dogs, sometimes with those big metal spikes around the neck, so the leopard cannot easily kill the dog. And dogs actually protect the herd. They will also always keep the herd close to the campsite where they sleep, so they can keep an eye. Because all these, you have a lot of big sheep and goats there, but they also breed. So they're always like little ones, which are easy targets for those predators. And then yaks are there, then you'll also find, you'll see sometimes big herds, 20, 30 ibex or some wild mountain goats, but very shy, so they will always kind of run away. So overall, I think nothing really too much to be scared about. So wildlife is not your concern. I would say weather is a more deadly opponent than wildlife in the Himalayas. Compared to the treks we have been doing in South India, you find lots of more animal poop, lots of more traces of animal steps, because you have low altitude fertile forests where wildlife can flourish. These landscapes again, they're a little bit hospitable in the summer, but in the winter again it becomes very barren and not easy to survive there. So I think even the animals have to come to lower altitudes to survive the winter. And a couple of slides more, including power. So one of the things I also saw is these decades-old Philips radios, typically used by shepherds to not listen to Hindu songs, but I think to keep an eye on the All India radio on AM frequency, because they don't have internet there. They don't know when the next snowstorm is going to hit. They don't know when the pass is going to close. So I think they always keep a close update on the weather news, so that they can always go home, that they're not stuck there and die, being cut off once the pass is closed. Yeah, so one thing this year which was pretty cool, as I told, a lot of the hamlets, especially in Uttarakhand, especially the shepherds, passes which were not present on the maps anywhere, have been added by me on OpenStreetMaps. So with OSM AND, that mobile app available on iPhone and Android, you can also offline mark some of these places, bridges, campsites, passes, anything that's useful reference as a hiker. And as you get into the city and the network, you can upload these things online to the central repository, where everybody will have those villages and passes available when you download the maps now. Photoblogging is very useful. I don't carry anything to record my trail, but I keep my GPS switched on the phone. So every photo I take typically has a geo, latitude and longitude, geo-reference inside it. So you can generate these beautiful maps in Google Maps and Google Photos, which actually shows you an overview of the route, like a visual journey of the routes. And also you can download this as a GPS log and use it to navigate and reiterate the same routes. So how did we manage power? So I started off with a solar panel. You have these foldable panels which you can flap out, and then you can get a pretty good range. You can charge like a 3000 mAh mobile battery in some maybe 3-4 hours if you put it in direct strong sunlight. But my experience was not too good with that side. I think if you are on the move all throughout the day, if you don't settle down like the commercial groups by 2-3 p.m. and then keep that solar panel on your tent facing the sun, as you keep this panel on your backpack and you're moving sometimes through forest, you're facing against the sun. Never worked well. It also failed after 3 weeks. So finally I ended up with the same configuration as last year, a 10,000 mAh battery pack. And like my phone is also pretty new. So my phone goes for 2 days, 4,000 mAh battery. And then with the 10K power bank, I take another 4 days, 2 charges, 2 days each. So I have 6 days of power with me. 6 days is more than enough to reach the next village. Even in Ladakh, where they don't have power, many villages have solar panels now. They have inverters, they have batteries, and you can charge your stuff along the way. And then storage, if you take a lot of videos and photos like I do, you easily generate 1 gigabyte per day of media, right? All these modern cameras take like 5-10 megabytes per single picture. This short 3 seconds of HD video, and that's again 500 megabytes or something. So you need to carry enough space with you. Most of the phones might only come with 64 MB of storage, so you carry a lot of these USB sticks, flash drives, OTG sticks, which you can plug in the phone and keep copying photos, anything you like onto the stick, and then give it to the next person safely to home while you keep shooting more GBs every single day. And then again, I mean, interpass commutes, not all the passes are connected directly. Sometimes you have to cover 20 kilometers to the base of the next pass. You don't want to walk on a tar road or a road. It's not the purpose of this trip. You want to stick to the remote places and the trails. So Himachal has a wonderful network of bus connectivity. Many remote villages have a morning bus, have an evening bus. So you end up in the village in the evening, you take the bus to the next city, you have good food, and then you take the morning bus till the base of the next pass. Uttarakhand mostly works with share taxis. That's all the pilgrims there move with taxis, not really buses. And then Ladakh, you won't find anything. So Ladakh, you are mostly hitchhiking most of the time. Many people are asking, how do you pay for these trips? I spend much less money in the Himalayas than I spend in being in Chennai. On an average, I spend on 250 rupees. Most of the days I don't spend anything because you get fed by the people there. So 60 rupees is more than enough to buy a plate of momos, to buy a plate of rotis, 2-3 meals in a day, that's it. So 200 rupees covers your food expense. I never stay in lodges, never stay in commercial places. So if you can eliminate the cost of stay, the cost of private taxis and all that stuff, which can be expensive, then it just comes down to food, which is pretty cheap in these remote places. So money can never be a reason not to try some of these things. Okay, if you want to know more, guys, I have a beautiful blog here where I document everything meticulously. Every single day of those 120 days has been blogged on the blog, so you can find a lot of detailed info and photos. I also post every day on Instagram 2-3 posts with beautiful pictures. So, and then Facebook will have the same posts. So a lot of information, educational videos, maps you'll find on these blogs to plan your own trips. And the final slide then. So I think we can still take some questions maybe from the audience here, or some of the interesting questions online, Kushal.
One question is related to sleeping bag temperature.
Yeah, some of the guys say sleeping bag is important. Some of the guys come with our S15 Quasha, which we use in South India, which obviously is not going to work over there. So you need to have a good sleeping bag, but that's the problem with everything, right? Any gear, whether it's a sleeping bag, whether it's an ice axe, whether it's a pole, if you want something that is light and comfortable, then you'll have to spend a little bit extra money. If you're going to take something a little bit more economical, like a sleeping bag, you're going to end up with 3 kgs and a huge bulky bag, which will keep you warm in the night, which will make you suffer in the day carrying that 3 kilograms 2,000 meters up the hill. Oh, thanks Salva for coming. Before we take more questions, I'll take a quick picture, which I cannot do because the phone is there. If somebody has a good camera, like a OnePlus or a latest iPhone, if you can take a picture of the audience. Be seated. At least as an...
OnePlus.
Okay, super. My favorite. Let's take a picture. Be seated, be seated. To look good. Just for take one more picture, and then we'll keep doing some Q&A. People who want to leave early can leave early in the local audience. Others, we can just do a few more questions. So I know the presentation is a little bit high level and technical. You can probably do another 3-4 sessions going more in depth on maps and technical stuff and all that stuff, but I think this is enough to give you a first flavor at least.
Peter, what about the running gear, Peter? You have like totally different terrains, like from ice to hard rocks to grass. So do you use the same shoe for all of them, or you can carry multiple?
Yeah, and normally, I mean, on snow people will use crampons, on ice people will use the mini crampons. Different terrain, ideally speaking, needs sometimes different gears. But again, as an independent solo hiker minimalist, you don't have that luxury. So you climb up Stock Hungry with plain shoes instead of crampons. You manage with what you have.
You essentially did with the same shoe also.
Yeah, and not just the shoe, even like, I carry this BB. This BB is not really suitable if you want to camp, like in, say, towards the winter. If you have heavy snowfall, it's not going to be pleasant there. But you have to compromise. I mean, it's not always easy. Sometimes, like this ice axe was very needed in June when I had to cut through a lot of these frozen gullies. But then in Ladakh, because I didn't have anyone coming in or going out, I was ending up carrying this ice axe for 2 months. And I never used it a single day there in those rocks because there was no ice there. So it's, yeah, I mean, ideally speaking, you should, for every month, you should actually be able to update your gear set to be optimally loaded.
Peter, do you have like a good sleep at the high altitude?
Yeah, so I mean, I was there for 4 months. I always had a good sleep, much better than when I stay in Chennai, because you're in the open air, you're fresh. I don't like to sleep in rooms. I was warm and comfortable with this quilt. I slept well. Yeah, I mean, if you go above 4,000 meters, your oxygen in the air drops to 50%. Sometimes you're a little tucked in your BV or tucked in your sleeping bag, so the amount of air coming in is even less. So some 10 guys joined me in between. So some of the guys never slept a single day and really becoming very exhausted after 2-3 nights of no sleep. That's what I'm saying. Without proper food and without proper rest, you're not going to sustain very long. So it's a very individual thing. Some people are very prone to AMS. Some people don't, or immediately climbing up above 4,000 meters without any problem. Some guys need 4 or 5 days to acclimatize. Some people don't sleep well at all. Some people don't take the cold very well. Some people don't take the food very well. So it's a very individualistic response to these things. But overall, I was quite okay. As again, I was there for a long time, and I was like super acclimatized, right? I went from Uttarakhand, slowly going up to Himachal, slowly going towards Ladakh. So doing this over 4 months, you're like super acclimatized and super accustomed to sleeping in the open most of the time.
What's the average night temperature?
Actually, that's why I'm saying most of the time, especially like, it depends also. Like say in May it's colder because you're at the end of the winter. In September also you'll feel the temperature dropping at say 3,000 meters because you're at the beginning of the winter. But like say July, August, the temperature is pretty comfortable. Sometimes you're not even sleeping in that quilt. You just sleep in the open, because again, as a minimalist guy, you go fast, you come down to the valley, 2,000 meters, which is Kodai height, right? And you sleep in the open, you can't even go in your quilt because you start sweating. And it's in the summer, right? It's August, July is a little bit of peak summer. So it all depends on the altitude actually. Of course, when you go above 3,000-4,000 meters, you never want to typically sleep above 4,000 much with a minimalistic shelters, which most of, except for a couple of exceptions, I never did actually. Mostly I go below 3,000, and then as long as you block that wind tends to be very cold because it constantly takes away your body heat. And if you're out of the wind and at below 3,000, you're actually pretty comfortable. Yeah, I had AMS on the first flight when I went with my Bullet first time to Leh Manali highway, somewhere near Sachu, where I slept on whatever 4,200 meters. Then I was sick. But after that, every single time, every 1 or 2 years, I returned to the Himalayas, never again. So I guess, yeah, say again?
No, you keep changing the attitude.
Yeah, like that, yeah. But once you're acclimatized, once you have gone over a pass and the second pass, you have gone to 4,000, I guess your body has regulated, say, maybe a little bit of extra oxygen or red blood cells, what is it, say, to carry enough oxygen to your brain. Once you're acclimatized, then there is no looking back. Then you go to 5-6K, not a problem. So initial acclimatization is there. As long as you keep going up every day, it's fine. Of course, when you come back to the plains now, after 3 weeks, that acclimatization would have gone. Now again, after 2-3 weeks, I think, you lose it, and you have to acclimatize again. But it stays with you at least for, because I do a pause every day, so I always go do my altitude, so not a problem.
So it essentially gives out AMS happens only in the Ladakh region or even for...
Oh, I mean, even if you go from Manali over that, what is it, that touristic pass? Rotang, yeah. Sachu is on the way, but Rotang is a road, right? Next to Rotang you have a hiking pass, that Hamta pass, 4,200 meters. Even there you get AMS, so there you should ideally, anything above 3.5 to 4, you should be careful. You should take it slow, take only 500 meters extra every day. And typically you can go a little bit up during the day and then ideally come down a little bit to sleep at a lower altitude. Because when you sleep actually, right, your metabolism reduces, your heartbeat, your breathing will reduce, and you're already getting less oxygen, and then at least during the day you'll be breathing more heavily to take in more oxygen, I guess. But in the night when you sleep, and then especially in a tent or in a bivy, which is completely zipped up, you're cutting out all the oxygen. So yeah, in the night typically that's where it might start.
How essential was sleep for your journey? Because you had to do distances, you had to do it in multiple hours.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Sleep is very important. So I was doing around 10 hours of walk every day. So one good thing about being in the outdoors is that your daily cycle is aligned with the sun cycle, right? So there is no light, you don't have the light switch near the glacier there. So as the sun sets down, the days are long there, 5 a.m. till 8 a.m., 8:30 p.m. sorry, in the peak summer. Little bit less in September, little less in May. But you have long days, and it's also very gradual. It's not like suddenly dark like in south. You're at a higher latitudes, so the sun goes down under a more inclined angle, so it gets dark very slowly. And typically I always got up at 6 automatically because of the daylight falling on your face. And then you pack up very soon, 6:30 you're walking, and then typically I settle down by 6, even though you have daylight till 8. By 6 once the sun becomes a bit lower, you'll feel the chillness coming in, and it's time to start looking for a campsite. You don't want to push it till it's dark and you're not able to see anymore, to find a suitable, safe place to camp with water and a little bit flat out of any landslide prone areas. So yeah, 6:30 to 6 almost. So 12 hours, and that gives you a good, say you eat quickly, there's not much social life up there. So you easily sleep 10 hours to 12 hours a day, which gives you good sleep. And sleep is amazing because you have pushed so hard, you have eaten some good food, and bang, you're knocked out completely.
Online there is a question related to quilt, that blue gold.
Yeah. What's the question?
Yes. How come it's like
Yeah, Blue Bolt. I mean, they have a separate website, bluebolt.in. It's Josefa, a very nice guy, experienced guy, very knowledgeable guy on these insulation materials because I'm not much of an expert there. But it's unbelievable. I mean, that quilt is so light, and once you get in that, I mean, even on that Kang Light 5,000 meters, you're actually in a freezer there because you're on top of a glacier. It's windy, it was started to rain, the weather was changing, and you get in that quilt, as long as you close all the gaps, it simply traps your body heat, and on the website has a lot of technical details on what materials are used there. It also doesn't condense, it doesn't. Problem with many things is that it's very cold outside, and inside your body heat is there, so it starts condensing and getting wet. So that was not the case with this one. And then also, if it gets wet because of you don't have proper shelter and you get some rain or some melting ice, this material also dried very quickly. So it was like really like some amazing piece of equipment that, and luckily I was able to carry this year. Because last year I went with my S15, which was not really the most suitable piece of equipment. And in India again, normally you don't get, as you know, right, because of all this customs duty and a bit of a closed market, you don't have access to all these beautiful outdoor gears that in the US you just drop in any store, outdoor store, and you will get so many beautiful equipment at a very reasonable price. In India, okay, in Leh, there you had quite a few shops, and Manali, there you have more choice, but in south, going to the Himalayas from south here in China, you don't find much of proper gears actually that are useful for the north.
And one more, was there a lot of differences in layer ranges from your first trip 10 years ago and now?
Learnings, or what? Differences?
Differences.
Like in the landscape?
You have done that layer treks in 10 years ago.
Yeah, so I've been going for 20 years. I mean, of course, 20 years ago, you're either running or cycling or biking, which means you're on the Manali-Leh highway, you're on the Spiti Valley, you're on the Pangi Valley to Jammu, or you're on the Leh-Srinagar highway. These are the four things. So, and if you compare actually the roads with some of the interior valleys, that's a totally different thing. If you go Manali to Leh, you'll think this is like one ugly, barren landscape, rocks and dust, and there's nothing, there's no life there, and it's like a barren desert. But once you start exploring some of these interior valleys, you come in like beautiful green, lush grasses, flowers, you'll have even small little trees, which are all starting because of that melt water along the stream. And you will even find animals, marmots, you'll find birds, you will see bees moving around, so you're in a beautiful hidden treasure actually, which is not visible on any of those main roads actually, so it's difficult to compare that way. But as I told, I mean, I've definitely seen the changes of global warming. Most of July until mid-August when I was in Ladakh, I saw daily drizzle or rain, which I've never seen, and I also saw some days with more rains, which is very unusual for Ladakh because normally you're always there under a very hot, intense sun at 4,000 plus meters. So this year, something is changing there definitely.
How does one learn navigation and the map reading and all of that?
If you go to the website, there is something called Navigation Bootcamp, which is like 8 modules of practice, little bit of theory with a lot of practice. I will give you small assignments which you can do. You'll have to go in some little bit, like in the paddy fields or a small hill near the city, and do a little bit of practice hands-on, then submit some answers to an online system, and I'll give you feedback. So there is a nice navigation bootcamp, it's called. It's on the website, which is a very good way to get started on satellite maps, on topographic maps, contours, and to start navigating.
Where are you headed next?
So next Sahyadri is in a few weeks. It's perfect time after the monsoon. We have 350 forts built by Shivaji on very steep, profound rocks. There I did 30 in February, a little bit hot in Feb, but now in October, November will be the perfect timing. And then probably this time I want to go back in deep winter, December, January to not the passes because that will be too difficult and dangerous. But at least to some of these villages and hamlets and valleys to basically take in and capture on photo and video this beautiful land, totally different landscape, right? Winter completely buried in snow. So So of course we'll need a different gear set. It's going to be more tough to plug through feet of snow. But I think it's worth it. It's going to be a very nice experience to visit the same place, which will look totally different. Yeah.
Consider your phone is switched off.
Yeah.
Your physical map, which are the chart on the so you don't have the chart. And you're walking for 2-3 days and you don't find any settlement, any shepherd or anything. What will be your mindset and how will you approach?
Also, the question here is to repeat for the online audience: what if something happens to your one and only navigation device, the phone? You can drop it, it can break, or you can run out of power. So I think it's always good to carry as a backup like a couple of paper maps with you, contour maps. Yeah, because that with a compass would really be useful. I mean, some of the alpine style hikers I met along the way, they don't use the phone. They actually use those big foldable maps. Many of the Europeans use those maps, and that's pretty clear, the turns of the valley and this and that. Otherwise, I think the safest way is to retrace your steps, right? You don't want to go forward unless you're pretty close to your exit point. But otherwise, I would be preferring to go back the same known route, because again, as you enter like this unknown landscape, and if you're on a trail, it's okay if you're not. That's what I told in one of the slides. It's a huge difference between on trail and off trail. Once you leave the trail, yeah, okay, you'll have your directions, no problem. You know where the sun comes up in the east, the moon comes up in the east, the sun sets in the west. So you'll find your directions, but that landscape is so steep and so barren that if you lose the trail, you're in deep trouble. You know, it's too steep in many places, only because there is a trail, only because those shepherds and those ancient routes have been opened between villages, some trade routes and some access routes. We can be lucky to have these beautiful trails available to us, but without those trails, it's simply impossible to cross some of these valleys and slopes, because it's simply too steep. The streams are too wild. If you don't have a bridge, you're completely stuck on one side of the stream. So I had a couple of experiences like that my phone is okay, but I'm off the trail, so I'm actually stuck in a forest, going through dense jungle. I can see the shepherds on the other side of the valley, I can see the trail on the other side of the valley, but I'm not able to go there because there is a 100 meter steep drop, and there is a wild stream there which I cannot cross, so I'm stuck. And then it's like, then it's very tricky. I mean, then you need to start climbing tricky sections, you need to find a way down into the snow gully, then try to find an ice bridge to cross the stream. So, yeah, and then also it depends, right? So that's the Himalaya situation. If you go to Ladakh and Zanskar, those barren landscapes again, there it's even worse, because all those highly eroded landscapes, without a trail, you're in trouble. You cannot get out of that place. You're stuck. It's too steep. Canyons, wild water streams, highly erosive landscapes. You can't climb up if there's no trail. So you're stuck and you're in trouble. So rule number one is, I think, stay at the known place, go back the same way. Or if there is a trail, then of course, then you can proceed. But stay on the trail. Don't get off trail, or you'll be in trouble for sure. A couple of experiences myself. It's actually very dangerous off trail, because it's not like we used to do in Nagalapuram, Nagari, or South, or even Kabinal Reserve Forest in Karnataka. You can go anywhere, there is no trail, no problem. Wilderness hiking, we use the ridges, we use the valleys. But here it's all less extreme. It's less extreme weather conditions, it's less extreme steepness and landscape. It's a totally different ball game in the Himalayas. So that's why huge respect for these shepherds. I mean, if you see the way they go up without much of trail, how they open those, you saw those steep traverses, right, rock climbs, and they do that with those 500 sheeps. That's amazing, actually, those guys. They were like, and they do that with plain 60 rupee rubber shoes. They don't order $100 specialized trail shoes from the US. They don't have fancy carbon poles. They use a wooden stick. They carry much more than we carry, because they carry food and heavy blankets to stay there for the next couple of months. And these are not young guys. I mean, in their 20s, 30s. These are guys who have been doing that for decades. They're in their 50s, 60s. But if you look at their fitness level, man, sometimes you meet one guy, come join me to the campsite, you'll stay with me. You have trouble keeping up with these 60-year-old guys, hopping like mountain goats across boulders in the streams and across like steep things. They spend every year, I guess, for the last 30, 40 years in those landscapes, right? So obviously they are used to that, and their legs are tuned to that. But those guys have good knowledge of the terrain. They can really graze off trail and go to very barren, remote valleys without trails because they have been going every year and they have been passing on that knowledge for generations or by their trekking buddies. So they have a little bit more freedom than we. We should be a little careful, I think, because once you enter a place and you might enter through a very narrow possible passage, but once you come back, you can be stuck on all the sides through steep rock faces, and unless you find that little passage through that steep rock face back out, you're screwed basically. Because you don't carry, again, mountaineering rope, gears or ropes or anything to even cross like a 5-10 meter drop. So it's a bit tricky. Any other questions?
Peter, have you come across any ice stupas that is especially around the Lingshid community? Because Ladakh is basically a barren landscape.
Stupas, I mean, you have those...
Ice stupas. For irrigation purpose, they are storing water in ice stupas.
Oh, is it? Okay. I didn't know. I've seen some stupas near the pass. Normally you only see the Tibetan prayer flags. But I've seen some... No, not okay.
Because Lingshid is the only greenery area here. We have shown in the slide.
No, I've shown, but there are many places which are green. So you'll only find villages. You'll only put villages where they can form, which means there will always be a side stream. The main stream is too deep down. They don't have electricity to pump up the water. Every single village will have a side stream. Of course, as soon as that glacier dries up because of global warming, they are completely screwed. That's the end of life for the village. And that's what we see in many places. Yeah, so we'll have a small cake cutting ceremony for the happy birthday boy under the audience, Mr. Anbu. And I think any people online who still have questions, just drop your questions in the live audio. We'll get back to you with answers. We'll keep the session on for a few more minutes, so drop your questions before we close the session. I think we can now zoom into the birthday party. We can keep it open maybe for some time so they can ask questions. Thanks guys for joining.
Thank you.
I should have taken it, but I'm with the cycle, so somebody took my card. But you can always drop in and I can show you. That's a must. That video is so compact because you're simply killing yourself with it. Want to see that? No problem. There are photos online, and I can also show it to you. Anytime you come to Usbesi. I had a locator, yeah, but I lost it on where the satellite locator with an SOS button because as you go solo and as you get stuck in a place. But unfortunately, I lost it somewhere on the way.
You lost it?
I knew where it was, but somebody snatched it. Somebody came behind me.
So sharing your wonderful experience.
So who is going next?
How does one start preparing in terms of fitness? Just running every day?
Yeah, running is a good way because running builds a lot of strength, right? You're going to climb a lot there, and especially going down with so much of strength, so much of impact on your knees. So you're going down not just with your body weight, but also with the back. Climbing up is pretty heavy. So running is a good one. Running will get you very quicker than hiking. Hiking will take some time.
Happy birthday to you.
Sound please.
Guys, keep the place clean.
Keep the place
Thanks, Anu. Nice cake. Not when it comes to the yeah, somebody is told me, I think Palani saw
Some legends are discussing. Married people are here now.
Disclaimer, be careful with getting married. Most of the guys disappear and lose fitness very soon. Now I think
Recently married.
One more married guy.
now you're a young guy.
And birthday boy.
Good to see you also. I remember running behind you with pretty slow and running uphill.
You are in Chennai nowadays? Moved to Chennai.
Oh, you were somewhere else? No. Next door. I went for some beauty parlor, rubber some of my feet. My shorts is completely gone, so I had to be really sweet.
Hello, I'm good. How are you? Nice meeting you after a long time.
That's the second one. It's also use for one and all. Once you get used to like super tension, super comedy, somebody's selling your t-shirt, but it's a little thicker, so then quickly starts sweating on this next t-shirt.
The cameraman.
I've been out for a while.
Okay, so how long will you be here?
1 or 2 weeks. I will be mostly out and once in a while.
I just wanted to catch up with you on sometime.
Sure.
Doing Himalaya.
I'm staying busy.
Yeah, we can go for lunch sometime.
Tomorrow?
Sounds good.
Yeah?
Yeah, tomorrow is good.
Same number.
Also still doing some hikes.
I just came back from I did such a beautiful one of the famous to watching.
Yeah.
I did it the first time I did it with the same
Shall we close the video?
We can cut, I think. Oh, you're zooming into. Let's cut all the questions should have come in, so we'll just answer them.
We answered almost all the questions.
Oh, is it super? How many people were coming in?
Almost 30-40 was there. Now last 11 people was there. Still there. Finish.